my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Secular Campus. This is GSU's Fellowship of Free-Thinking, Agnostic, Ruralized Secular Students, where all faiths are welcome, and our only sacred truth is that there are no sacred truths. So welcome, everyone. Normally we meet on Wednesday nights, but we have a special treat tonight. We're meeting in collaboration with ex-Muslims of North America to have a discussion about fighting Allah and defending Muslims. So I'm really excited to have you guys here tonight. So I would like to introduce Imtiaz Shams. He is the founder of Faith to Faithless, an organization which works to reduce the stigma faced by apostates of all religions. Also, I'd like to welcome Armin Navabi. Armin is the former Muslim from Iran and is the founder of the Atheist Republic on Facebook. You should definitely check it out. It's a very good page. And finally, I would like to welcome Syed. He is a human rights activist, speaker, community organizer, and most importantly, he is the founder and president of Ex-Muslims of North America. Please give him a warm welcome.
Hello, everyone. So a little bit about what we're doing. Normalizing dissent, for one. Generally speaking, the problem that's very common within for ex-Muslims in general is that they don't know anybody. It's hard to speak out. How do you connect with people that don't want to be found? There's a huge stigma surrounding apostasy itself. Hello? So there's a huge stigma surrounding apostasy, surrounding leaving Islam. And so we started Ex-Muslims in North America to sort of counter that, to counter the cost of apostasy. We started off with building communities in various cities. We're in about 25 cities right now. And the hope was that as people become more empowered, they connect with other people, they can speak out. And one of the biggest things regarding normalizing anything is being visible, is showing up where people understand who you are, understand your perspective, even if they don't agree. So we've been, after starting up the communities, we've been active in creating videos like the ones you saw. We call them Life Beyond Faith, to highlight the fact that you can leave religion and can have a good, happy life. It's possible to live without God. We're also doing this campus tour where we're going around the country, speaking on schools, changing attitudes towards ex-Muslims, both among Muslims and the broader public. Regarding the topic itself, it's a bit controversial. So we've got a lot of pushback specifically on this topic. We were told that it was oxymoronic to an extent. How do you fight the God of Muslims while defending Muslims themselves? Often Muslims themselves have trouble making that distinction. One of the common refrains when, at least in the East, I grew up in Pakistan, is that the West is the enemy of God. From my perspective, and I'm sure the same may exist for the rest of the panel, I welcome that label, even though none of us really believe in God. The idea behind God can be toxic in many, many forms, and certain parts of it need to be excised and need to be challenged and need to be changed. And the only way that can happen is when we have these conversations. So one of the other issues that we see often is that in order to defend God, people are willing to sacrifice Muslim civil liberties. Muslims themselves are often happy to do that. As a religious person, defending your faith can take precedence over defending yourself or defending your fellow man. It's more important to defend your God. So we wanted to tease apart the difference between fighting the idea of religion, fighting God, and defending Muslim civil liberties, both over here and around the world. So I wanted to start the conversation with civil liberties themselves. In the West, often it's seen that the Muslim civil liberties are contingent on how Islam is perceived. So obviously there are a lot of subtopics here, so I'm going to run through a few different topics. So I'm going to start off with the hijab. I'm sure you all have seen in the news back and forth. There have been many controversies ranging from the Women's March to bans in various countries. So what is the role of the state? What is the role of women choosing themselves versus the inherent nature of hijab. So we'll start the conversation with that. Imtiaz, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that often gets talked about is when you've got people fighting for the rights of Muslims, for example, often people. No, I'm not even talking about Muslims. I'm talking about, for example, the left, right?
Yeah.
Some of the left. What they'll do is they'll look for the best sort of caricature of what they think a Muslim is. So in Britain, for example, a lot of the speakers you'll find, not just in Britain, might be converts to Islam, and they're white. And often they're the sort of representation because they wear the hijab or because they're male and they're white and they fit the stereotype and the profile of a Muslim. And I think that's quite dangerous because what you're doing is you're saying that Muslims look like a certain way, they follow a certain way, everyone else is a bad Muslim. And I think it actually affects Muslims quite a lot themselves. I remember there's a guy who's I think from a Shia background where I'm in London, and he was saying to me that his whole life he basically felt like an ex-Muslim because he said all these Sunni people around me used to basically takfir me, like act like I'm not a Muslim. And he said, Imtiaz, your story I feel more in touch with than I feel with Muslims, because there's this kind of who's a real Muslim, who's not a real Muslim. He doesn't really get any media time either. So if there's any Muslim issues, he generally doesn't get into the media unless he's saying something that kind of fits in with the narrative they're looking to push. So I think there's a real problem with the assumptions around what a Muslim looks like, especially in the media.
Right. Well, I want to go back to what you said a little bit earlier with regards to the title and how some people even came out and find it too controversial, saying fighting Allah. And the problem that we have here, a lot of people think that for you to get along with people, you have to find common ground. You have to agree with them. And that's, I think, is a very dangerous suggestion, because it suggests that if we don't agree, then we can't get along. And the reason why we don't shy away from saying stuff like fighting Allah is because we want to show that we could disagree with you and we don't have to hold back and we could still fight for your rights. We will challenge your ideas, we will fight for your rights. You shouldn't make agreement a condition for friendship. And a lot of Muslims actually get that, where at first they don't, at first they're offended, but I get surprised by how successful it is once this is explained to them, because I often tell them, listen, you could fight atheism. That doesn't mean you're against me. If you are right, atheism is the most dangerous ideology in the world. It is, because if you are right, us by advocating for atheism, we're robbing people of their eternal afterlife. And I hope you win if you're right. And if you believe in what you believe in, the most moral thing to do is to fight atheism. And I don't see that as an unkind thing towards me. I see that as actually a kind gesture, because you care about me enough to come and try to make me a Muslim. Because you care about my soul. You don't want me to burn. And I hope you manage to successfully convert me if you are right. But when we say fighting Allah and you're like, oh, why are you attacking us? This is offensive. We are trying to desensitize people from not just agreement, but very aggressive disagreement, because we want to show that no matter how passionately we disagree, we could still get along.
And there's almost it's almost a little bit. I think it's quite judgmental and prejudiced to say to. Sorry about that. I have a very quiet voice. I'm going to shout it up. I think it's quite prejudiced to actually assume that Muslims cannot change or cannot accept. So I work with Faith to Faithless. We work with people from all apostate backgrounds. So a lot of ultra-Orthodox Jews who leave, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, things like that. So I get to see a lot of kind of problems across a lot of faiths. And one of the things that I find very interesting is that assumption that people cannot change is a lie. Right. So I've dealt with so many ultra-Orthodox Jews whose families should basically cut them out. They can't. Even Jehovah's Witnesses, where they have shunning doctrine, where the idea is if my child left it and left Jehovah's Witness, and I don't cut them out of my whole life, I get kicked out. I get called an apostate. So imagine in that environment, which I think in some ways can be more extreme than some Muslim families, even in those families, sometimes the Jehovah's Witnesses who leave get accepted. So why is it impossible for Muslims to accept? I think it's not. I mean, we've got family and friends who are Muslims who have decided to accept us.
Right.
So, that's the truth.
And that acceptance is a very important point, because a lot of people say to us that you really think Muslims are going to leave Islam?
1.9 billion Muslims.
But first of all, of course not. But even one person is such a great, worthy cause to fight for. Like, even if you could save one person from dogma, that's worth all of the activism we do. But even if that's a great achievement. But as Imtiaz mentioned, even accepting of atheists, even if you talk to somebody, to a Muslim, and you debate it and you discuss your disagreements, and you both come and you're still an atheist and they're still a Muslim, and you haven't convinced them of anything, but you still remain friends at the end, you have achieved something. You have achieved disagreeing and remaining friends, even if you didn't convince them of anything. And if you could show that to people, that look, we passionately had a debate, nobody changed their mind, and we're still getting along, that's already a change in perspective. That you already changed people's opinions about Muslims and Muslims about this, so that this is possible. We can disagree with people. We could think that atheism is ridiculous. We think people that leaving Islam are wrong, but we get it. We get where they're coming from, and they're not evil.
Considering what one of the topics that I wanted to touch on was how the right views Muslims, and that idea that people can change is very powerful. And often the reason there's a lot of pushback and xenophobia directed towards Muslims is the idea that whatever their views are, they're all uniform for one, and that they're unchangeable. So even if, say, every single Muslim in America held some horrible view, it's not that they will always hold that view. We can talk to them, we can convince them. And the thing is that in America, we have free speech, which is amazing, which in most Muslim countries you don't really have. You can't stand up and say you're wrong about this doctrine, you're wrong about a specific issue within Islam. So trying to shut down those conversations is insanely counterproductive, because this is the only place where we can have those conversations.
But I mean, on the dangerous level, what will happen is that they'll look at, for example, I've been called by right-wing people like, oh, I'm doing taqiyya. It's like, what, because I'm brown, I'm still a secret Muslim.
Once a Muslim, always Muslim.
There's this real assumption that, but I think that's very important, because the right cannot distinguish, some of the right cannot distinguish between ideology and people, right. Which is, by the way, what we're accusing the left of doing as well, because they can't distinguish between ideology and people. Sorry. No, I was just ranting.
Which will happen a lot. This is a sort of a passionate topic. So we have the same sort of issue on the left and the right, where both of them are unwilling to distinguish between the bad ideas that people can hold and the people themselves. There are different motivations going on. Right. On the right, it's basically that this is an essential element of Muslims. This idea is horrible, and therefore these people are horrible. Versus there are certain bad ideas that people can hold and can be talked out of, and we can move forward as a country. On the left, on the other hand, there's this issue where the only way we can defend Muslim civil liberties is if their ideas are good. Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, that's a very good way to put it, because to the right, because the right sometimes think like we're on their side, and they're like, yeah, Islam is bad, fuck all Muslims. They're like, yeah. Like, no, and it seems like the right is. Many people on the right are also can't separate this whole idea of Islam of Muslims, and we say like Islam. Yes, Islam is a evil ideology, but most Muslims don't follow it. Most Muslims but their incentive for making Islam and Muslim the same thing is because they want the conclusion from Islam being bad for Muslims being bad. They're looking for that conclusion. And the left, on the other hand, wants Muslim and Islam to be the same thing, because they want to come to us and be like, when we say Islam is bad, they're like, okay, we found somebody to protect. We need to protect minor Muslims that these people are attacking, and we're here to save the day. But they're not saving the day. They're not protecting anybody. Actually, they are themselves responsible for the rise of the alt-right, because they are the people that are shutting down the conversation. When we go to Muslims, they want to have these conversations, but they're in the way, like, no, you can't say these things. And no conversation, you guys are being offensive. But we used to go to the left and be like, we're not attacking these people, but we have got not much from out of that. So we're basically going around them and we're going directly to Muslims right now because we're getting a better results out of that. When we explain to the Muslims themselves, a lot of them seem to get it, even if they don't buy our argument. Once we explain where we're coming from, it seems like they get it that this is actually not a personal attack on them.
I mean, one thing, can you guys all hear me, by the way? Is that better? I find, with the work I do with apostasy, because we see the same thing in a lot of other groups, so, but what I find is when you are speaking, so you just said Islam is an evil ideology. Let's just throw that out there, okay?
Yeah.
So whatever, maybe it's not, right? That's the point, though. You can have that conversation.
We think it is, you think it's not, we could have a disagreement and we could discuss it. Right. So
that's changed. Like the fact is, unfortunately, a lot of people assume that conversation that just happened could not happen.
Right.
And so, I'll give you I'll tell you a story for 10 seconds. So there's in front of my station, I'm from London, in case you can tell. There's like stalls that they do da'wah, like proselytizing. And a lot of the kids reminded me of myself when I was young. And so there was this one kid I was talking to. He was talking to me, and he was doing the da'wah journey of how did this water happen and things like that. And I was going through that, and I started asking him about his family, like how did he get to this point? And we were having a civil debate. He does not agree with me at all. He doesn't agree that, in my opinion, that I don't believe the Quran is the word of God. I don't agree with him. But we were having a conversation about family, about food. Great. Someone else comes down who was the leader of that stall. He's one of those dudes, got like a silver tooth, and and he started seeing that me and him were having a good conversation, that we were humanizing each other. Right. And he shut the conversation down like that. Why? Because it's dangerous. If you're getting young people and you're telling them that you need to have a them versus us mentality,
right.
When you're having a humanizing conversation with the other, it's scary. Right. And that's why you see a lot of these dawah, the leaders of the dawah people don't like this. But normal people want to connect. Humans want to connect.
Yeah, the problem is when you say something like Islam is evil, they're like, okay, this sounds like something that the bigots say, so I'm just going to put you in that group, right? But the way I try to say, please don't group us with them, because if you group us with them, you are actually legitimizing them more. And if you shut us down, you're making the only anti-Islam discussion coming from the bigots, coming from the white supremacists, coming from the alt-right. We are the anti-Islam people that you want to have, because
friendly neighborhood.
Because it's better to be offended than to be discriminated against. It's better to be offended than to be discriminated against. We will challenge your ideas, we won't hold back, but when somebody comes in to try to take your rights away, we will stand side by side with you and fight against those people that are trying to discriminate against you because of who you are.
So, one of the best things from my perspective about America is our commitment to civil liberties. And the idea that Muslim rights should be protected, should be accepted by everybody. And we need to be making the case to the right that if they want to solve it, if we agree that there's a problem within Islam, if you want to solve that, the most important thing you need to do is to protect Muslim civil liberties. They need to feel like they belong in this country. That no matter what they think, no matter what ideas they hold, no matter how regressive or horrible or evil or any word you want to use, they are citizens with full rights just like everybody else. If they want to build mosques, they have the right to. If they want any right that any other American has, they have that too. And the benefit of doing that, again, from a right-wing perspective, is that will make them feel secure in this country. And the only time where you're open to new conversations or open to new ideas is when you feel secure. Right. When you feel like you're being attacked, you're not open to anything else. You're on the defensive. You're going to pull into your own community, pull into people that look like you, that talk like you, and you won't engage with the broader world. And the only way people integrate and change is when they have those kinds of conversations that you were just mentioning, where you humanize the other person, where you understand the other person's perspective, even if you don't immediately agree. And often when we see people leave Islam, it starts slowly. There's this tiny crack. You make those one connection, and then they look into more things. Things change gradually. Right. We can't expect things to happen overnight.
Yeah, the way I say it is the best way to fight Islam is to reach out to Muslims. The best way to reach out to Muslims is to befriend Muslims. And that's why fighting Allah and defending Muslims is not a contradiction. Because it's a great... Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to throw something out there. If someone listening to this might say that's patronizing?
Well, I'll say the other way around. The best way to fight atheism is to reach out to atheists. The best way to reach out to atheists is to befriend atheists. If you are true, if your religion is true, and you want, I suggest to you to go fight atheism, and the best way to get them to listen to you is to become their friends.
It's a real pity I don't see that many like Shia Dawa people, proselytizing. You'd be very
You missed your calling. So beyond the right side of our political spectrum, on the left side we have similar issues. Like I was mentioning, where there's this desire to make Islam positive, that everything within Islam is positive. Islam started in the 7th century. It reflects 7th century ideals, which is not weird or unheard of. It was from that era. If you look at any other religion or any other idea, it sort of reflects the milieu in which it started. To throw out an example, who is your favorite feminist from the 2nd century? Who is your favorite gay rights activist from the 5th century? You can't come up with anything because that wasn't a thing back then. So correspondingly, the issues within Islam reflect the normative ideas that were present where Muhammad was in the 7th century. To sort of try to change that into modern understanding of human rights is wrong. And what it does is that it shuts off conversations where Muslims can grapple with the complexity of their scripture and try to figure out a path forward. If you can't acknowledge there are problems, how can you fix the problems? How can you move forward?
I mean, there was this. Do you guys know that there was this same-sex marriage vote in Australia which just won, and I think it's in southwestern Australia or something like that, of the city that they did it in, which voted no, and it was predominantly a Muslim area. And I remember on my Facebook, I've got lots and lots of friends in Australia who are Muslim and ex-Muslim, but they tend to be more sort of progressive, most of them, not all of them, and they were saying, this is fantastic, and they were also pointing to the problems in their own communities, that, there was a huge push to vote no, but pushed partly by, the leadership, the Islamic leadership and all that. And then there was this article that came out on SBS News, which is an Australian news media organization, that said something like, people are talking about the fact that a large proportion of the Muslims voted no and these areas were Muslim, and that this is wrong because what happened with this vote is you forced migrants in their migratory journey to vote. And it wasn't that they're homophobic, that you were forcing them in their journey to vote on something that they're not going to vote on or ready to vote on. And I was just thinking, what? So I'm going to go to my uncle, let's say, or like my Muslim friend or something like that, and go, why did you vote against same-sex marriage? Oh, it was because I'm on my migratory journey. No, it's not. It's because there's homophobia. Like, the problem is, if you cannot point to a problem and say there's homophobia, how are you going to tackle it? And I do think it's quite racist, because what they're doing with this kind of narrative is looking at Muslims, people from Muslim heritage, including myself, and saying, y'all are the same. You're the same, you can't think differently. Oh, you have these issues that people saying that, you have some homophobia.
You're not capable of thinking differently.
Oh,
Often
yeah,
it's
I'm too
condescending in
stupid.
that way.
Oh, yeah. And they're saying Muslims are stupid because they're saying Muslims cannot engage with these issues.
Right.
It's so racist.
So it's giving up on the idea that these people can change.
Yeah.
So that is a large failing on the left. If you point out problems, human beings, at least in my opinion, are generally good. I would say the vast majority of human beings are good, is that they're trapped in bad ideas. If you force the conflict between the bad ideas they hold and the good values that they overall look at, everybody looks at themselves as, I'm a good person. When you stroke that dissonance, their ideas change. But by denying it, you're not allowing that conversation to happen.
So some Muslims or people that are defending Muslims, they come and say, like, look, listen, yes, you're attacking an idea, you're not attacking people. But you have to understand that for Muslims, Islam is part of their identity. So even if you think that you're attacking an idea and not the people, because Islam is such a strong part of their identity, for them it comes off as an attack on them personally. And I say yes, and that's why. But just because that's how it is. We can't just leave it like that, because I can't just be like, I think global warming is fake, it's a hoax. I mean, like that's part of my identity now. So because it's part of my identity, if any attack on it, it's a personal attack on me.
They're a little bit different, though, aren't they?
No, I mean it's such a lame excuse, though. Like you can't. We have
Scientology, whatever.
And Scientology, Christianity. I'm just saying that. What we need to do, yes, it is like that. We understand it. We used to be Muslims. What we try to do is to change that, and not for yeah. Some people tell me I'm not an ex-Muslim because I was never a Muslim. Anyways, I was a Shia. But here's the thing: we try our best to put ourselves in your shoes. So please, as Muslims, try to do the same for us. Try to see that from our perspective, we are attacking an idea. And yes, even if for you, Allah is the real thing and Islam is an awesome religion, you have to understand that when we're attacking it, for us, it's not your identity. From our perspective, this is just an idea and we're criticizing it. And even if for you that's you can separate that from your identity, if you see our intentions do matter. Then you see that you cannot group us with the people that are against you because of who you are, because where you come from. Because for most of these people, they don't really give a shit if you change your opinions on Islam or not. They are against you because of who you are and where you come from. So we're on the same boat as you with
I slightly disagree there in the sense that we can change their minds too.
Yes.
We shouldn't give up on them.
No, I never suggested that. I actually... we not only right, we can't give up on regressive leftists either, right? So anybody, we reach out to the right, we reach out to the left, we go to the right and try to express something like this. Fighting ideas cannot ever be successful if you are discriminating against people. We go to the left and we're saying we can't, you're shutting out conversations, we need to be Muslims want to have these conversations with us, you're not protecting anybody. But we also go to Muslims and say, like, even if we can't convince you of our ideas, can you please see that our intention is not an attack on you? So we have to reach out to everybody, and it does change. And the interesting thing is that most people that change their minds are Muslims. Like, Muslims are capable of thinking. A lot of people, the left that is trying to protect Muslims from these, they think like these Muslims are children. They're too sensitive. Like, they can't take it. Like, oh, I'm the guy that's going to protect them from these harmful, so offensive ideas. Like, no, like these are adult people. They can take a criticism.
And I think some of this kind of offense narrative is actually quite recent.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the Salman Rushdie affair, if you look at things like that, they were concocted. They were built. Those things, there are issues with dissent within different Muslim countries and communities and things like that. But actually, it's flared up in a way that in history there was a lot of dissent. Yes, a lot of dissent got crushed as well.
It didn't last long. There was dissent and it was crushed.
But I mean, But I mean, if you look at a lot of there's often this idea that the Islamic Golden Age was this great place where everyone kind of had this sort of unilaterally Sunni idea of Islam. But actually, a lot of the philosophers of the time were heretical, right?
They were persecuted
for it. Yeah, some of them said things that you'd be considered atheist today.
Right.
Militant atheist. On the other hand, also, this is off topic to a certain extent, but the Mutazilis themselves persecuted other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the Muslim Inquisition was done by the rationalists against the non-rationalists, like the Ash'arites. So it's more complicated.
This is another problem when people talk about ban Islam, right? Stuff like that. Like, ban Islam, what does that even mean? Like, how are you going to stop people from believing what they... And this, you're just alienating people and you're making them unapproachable because they're now scared of us because of you motherfuckers. Now they're afraid of us too. Now we can't talk to them either because they think we're one of you guys, right? So, but the thing is, like, banning Islam, Reza Shah tried that. Ataturk tried that. Look at their countries right now, right? You can't change... You can't have an up-down, top to bottom change. You can't just change things at a time. You can't have forced secularism, right? If you want people to come to your way and agree with you, you have to first educate people of what you believe in and what you don't believe in and why.
You can't have forced secularism. That'll be very, very bloody with a lot of people dying, and we don't want that.
Right, no. But how would you respond to somebody that said, like, you guys, like somebody from the right, alt-right or whatever they call these days, they come to you and they say, you guys think Islam is a dangerous ideology, but you're enabling people to spread it. This is a disease that is spreading, and you guys are part of the problem.
For this event, that's what people were saying. They were saying that, why are we talking about defending Muslims?
Yeah.
Some
people had the problem with the first line, some people had the problem with the second line.
And some people didn't get it. It was entirely confusing.
Right. Yeah. The people are messaging us like defending Muslims. I thought you guys were on our side. Like, what are you talking about? You're helping people. You're against Islam, but you're helping people spread this evil ideology. What? Like, I can't support that. Like, well, then get off of our team. Like, we don't want you on our side.
I don't remember being on your team.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, okay. If you so, one thing, if you're going to go to the so, I do want to point out that one reason why we even use offensive language is because we want to make the point that there is any resistance to people just speaking should be crushed, because there are people outside of this country that are waiting for us to speak for them. People sometimes come to us and tell us that, listen, we agree, okay, we get it, you guys have great intentions, congratulations, you're not like anti-Muslim, okay, fine, yeah, we get it, but you're helping their right, you're pushing their narratives, you're increasing racism, you're increasing bigotry by providing the alt-right or the xenophobes material to work with, right? And you have to understand the political climate that we're in and take that into consideration and adjust your tone accordingly. And you are being very selfish right now because you're looking at the political climate of United States, right? You're not considering the political climate of Saudi Arabia or Iran or Bangladesh or Indonesia or in Malaysia, right? Because there are people over there, people in Iran and people in Bangladesh that, guys, like, I'm scared to say these things. And it seems like in free countries, it's the only outlet. Please say this, please, like, we bring them on our podcast and try to or get news from them and listen to them and try to see what are the issues and when they look at some of us and we're saying like, maybe we shouldn't say that, maybe we shouldn't say this, maybe that's like, they're like, fuck you guys, we are dying here, like, we can't say things, like, we are looking at you. We have so many atheist activists that come to us and tell us that please don't tone it down. If you are the only hope we have, and a lot of people have given up. This is what I noticed in Iran. Iranians had a lot of hope for liberal, like we had a green revolution and all that got crushed. The only anti-Islam movement that I'm seeing right now in Iran is this Aryan supremacy, racist, anti-Arab movement. That's the anti-Islam movement in Iran right now. That's the biggest force against Islam, right? This is because everything else was crushed. People have given up on Muslims that left and are ex-Muslims now that are here. They were waiting. Some of them come here and they got disappointed because they looked at the left. Well, liberals are my natural ally, of course, but they got shunned out of those communities. They gave up, and they're looking at us and like, okay, that's not going to work. So we already have lost so many people that have given up on us. That's why we can't tone it down, right? And when we don't tone it down, please don't see that as that. We just see that as we're not forcing these on you.
Between me and Armin, I'm a little bit more toned down, but it's different.
You wouldn't have noticed that.
Yeah, but we are not coming to your mosque and saying these things. Unless you invite us.
Which we encourage you to do.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I found very interesting is because I stayed out of sort of the political conversation quite a lot. A lot of my work was kind of, okay, human rights, how do we work with apostate rights and things like that. And what I found is every single group has different mechanisms that people try to shut them down with. So in ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities, it's how do you take the children away? Because they often get married quite married or married off quite young. They have 6 to 12 children. The average is actually 7 to 8. And what happens is they throw lawyers at them, and there's a risk of losing children, so they can't talk, right? With ex-Muslims, what I found is, we've been helping and aiding people to do research, academic research at universities about the abuse that ex-Muslims face and how they deal with trauma. Those things get shut down. That's the scariest thing about it.
In academia, it's shut down.
In academia. So imagine, we're not talking about in any kind of political context, but why does it get shut down and how does it get shut down? It's often shut down by people who kind of, say, oh, we don't want to offend people. It's like, who the hell are you going to offend? We're literally talking about the trauma that people will go through from leaving faith, right? We've done studies in other faith backgrounds. No one really seems to care. Like, it depends on the power structure of that country, but no one generally cares. As soon as you talk about the rights of ex-Muslims, it's a problem.
Right.
I mean,
atheists in general.
Because atheists in general are quite discriminated, but I think ex-Muslims become politicized because Muslims are politicized.
No, like, for example, just in Malaysia recently, the government official minister over there said, we had an Atheist Republic meeting in Malaysia, and the minister said, we need to hunt down these atheists. And that got some news coverage, and it died out. But imagine if any government official said something like that about any other group. Imagine if Trump came out tomorrow and said, we need to hunt down the Muslims in the United States. Even
Out there they have a meetup.
Even in that's all they did. They just got together. They were having a great time because like, wow, there's more other atheists in Malaysia. They wanted to meet other atheists in Malaysia. That was the Kuala Lumpur. That's the only thing they were doing. And even in Saudi Arabia or in Iran, the government would like, oh yeah, we love our Christians, we love our Jews, we like Saudi Arabia, like we have maybe they discriminate against them, but they don't say that publicly. But Malaysia, which is supposed to be one of the most moderate Islamic countries in the world, the minister gets to come out and say, we want to hunt down the atheists, and he still gets to keep it's not even controversial. He gets to keep his job and nothing happens.
To add to that, how bad it is, in 13 countries, you can be executed for being an atheist. Leaving Islam is a capital crime.
Yeah.
In many other countries, there's jail time. 5 years, 10 years, 2 years. So it's simply based on your idea. I disagree with this idea and you will go to jail or you will be killed. In my opinion, it's one of the most persecuted groups in the world, and we don't ever talk about it. And the other side of it is that by guaranteeing the civil liberties of the most persecuted, it opens up the debate for everybody else. So if ex-Muslims have the right to say these things in, say, Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of other people in between that don't have those rights right now. They will be able to say stuff too. Right. So, as I was saying earlier, the best part of America, from my perspective, is the civil liberties that we have. We can speak out about anything. We can say whatever we want about Trump. We can say whatever we want about any religion, and it's okay. And we want to have that in other countries as well. And even within communities over here, we need to expand the envelope of what conversations are okay. Often, as Muslims, when I was Muslim, there are certain things that you don't touch. Those conversations don't happen because if you're talking about parts of the Quran being wrong, very few people can touch that topic because immediately you get into trouble. You're regarded as an apostate. As a Muslim, when I was starting to have doubts, I was talking with a friend of mine, and I said that the hadiths are a little insane. If you read them, they're way out. Well, I was Muslim at that point. I was trying to be polite. And we were talking about the issues within the hadith, and his reaction to me was, if you deny the hadith, you are an apostate.
I mean, I just want to throw something out with putting my very alt-left hat on. I don't know what you call it nowadays. Would you not say that is imposing this concept of Western freedom on other countries and communities?
Freedom is global. Freedom should be global. The West doesn't own freedom.
It's only a historical accident that they got there first. If things had gone down differently, say in the 12th century, it could have been civil liberties were a thing in the East, and the West was still stuck in Christendom and was still stuck in those horrible ideas. Around the 15th, 14th century, they were both bad places from a civil liberties perspective. They were able to make a certain advance due to various reasons. It's not that it's an idea owned by these people. It's an idea for all of humanity.
And you have to understand this idea of free speech, how historically and geographically unique it is. And that's why we're so protective of it, and how we're scared about losing it, because it's rare, and you have no idea how lucky you are to have that, right?
You come from like Iran or Bangladesh.
Right, you think like, of course free speech, like no, this people died for this, right? This is historically and geographically, this is very unique, this is very precious. That's why we want every time somebody's like, well, that's not, no, we're gonna say it. Whatever the thing is that you say we can't say it, we want to say that, because we don't want this to go away. This is a tiny little island where we could shoot our freedom of speech ideas from here to other places, like our ideas. So we don't want to lose this tiny little island, and we're going to fight to keep this freedom here and as much as we can.
What's really amazing for me to see is I deal with a lot of asylum seekers who get to the UK especially, who are like coming from Bangladesh and whatever, and they're ex-Muslims and things like that, is how you can see that as soon as they cross kind of the border, they're like on there, they're on social media, they're on YouTube.
Right.
But because in Bangladesh, obviously, they all, for historically, have had blogger names, they've seen friends be killed.
Right.
So as soon as they hit the country, they have to wait because they have to get their asylum.
Right.
But you can see that they're immediately just, it's
Right.
immediate.
I still have dreams about the Basij, the Iranian morality police knocking on my door, like, oh my God, they're coming. How did they get to Canada? They're coming for me.
They're even in Canada.
Right.
So going back to the situation in Muslim countries, I wanted to throw out a few examples. I'm from Pakistan, and Pakistan is a Sunni majority country. And
you can tell by the way you say Pakistan, by the way. Some ways to say Pakistan.
So minorities are routinely persecuted, both ethnic and religious minorities. One of the minorities is Ahmadi, and they had a sort of another prophet after Muhammad. And obviously from a mainstream Sunni perspective, that's heresy. And so they made a constitutional amendment declaring that these people who call themselves Muslims are not really Muslims. So imagine doing that in America. We're changing the constitution to say, you don't belong.
It's even worse than that. Like, if you're Pakistani and you have a Pakistani passport, it specifically says you're Muslim. Oh, and by the way, just making it clear, Ahmadis are not Muslim. Like, it's in your passport.
You have to sign that.
You have to sign that.
Right. And even if any of you go to Pakistan, apply for a visa, that line is in there on the visa form as well.
Why do you hate Ahmadis that much? It's like,
yeah. No, actually the main victims of Islam are Muslims. One reason why we fight Islam is because we care about Muslims. The Sunnis are discriminated against in Iran. The Shias are discriminated against in Saudi Arabia. If you are pro-woman, if you're pro-LGBT, if you're pro-free speech, if you're pro-secularism, if you're pro-democracy, you have to be anti-Islam.
But how would you argue that there are Muslims who are pro-LGBT? Clearly so.
Yeah, because people. Yeah, because this is what people do. People are like, oh, how could you say that about Islam? Look at all these Muslims that are fighting for gay rights. Look at all these Muslims that are fighting for democracy, for free speech. And I'm like, okay, again, you're confusing Muslims with Islam. Because what you are doing is you're reducing Muslims to nothing but Muslims. Muslims are far more than that. Islam is not the only thing that influences them, right? Every person has competing ideologies in their brain, in their mind, and what we're doing, they have humanist values. I think what we think, in our perspective, I know some of you disagree, but what we think is most Muslims are better than Islam.
You can see that I really like bothering.
By the way, I can see there's some to say. I'd like to have whoever disagrees with this. I'd like to have a discussion with you guys after.
There will be Q&A afterwards. So
would you not say that? Would you?
Guys, we can go in the Q&A afterwards, please.
I really thought Southern people were really chill.
That's the conversation we're having. If we can't even have this conversation here, where will it happen? It does.
Guys, come on, guys, listen to me. We're trying to have a talk. This is very rude. I'm being very British, I know, but this is being very rude. Calm down.
No, please don't leave. No, please don't.
It is what it is. If she's not willing to shut down, she's not willing to shut down.
Can you stay? No, can you? Shit. I would like to. Can you not? Can you stay? Is that possible or not? Is that an option? Guys, can you stick around until the end of the event? I would like to talk to you guys.
So, in Atlanta, we apparently can't have this conversation.
Actually, that's a very good point. See, if we can't have these conversations here, what chance do we have to talk about these things one day in Iran or Saudi Arabia?
Okay,
but those are the people that we should be having those conversations with.
So the point, though, is that by having these conversations, they're exposed to these ideas which are painful to them. But the more these conversations happen in the open, the harder it is to continually be offended by them. Attitudes change by them being confronted. If you look at the West, if you look at Christianity, the same sort of evolution happened there too. If somebody spoke against doctrines of Christianity, they were murdered, they were quartered, their heads were literally put on pikes. But things changed because people pushed anyways. In England in the 1800s, there was a magazine launched called The Freethinker, whose sole purpose was to offend Christians. They had cartoons mocking Moses, mocking Jesus, mocking God, and they went to jail over that. But the idea was they were provoking people to change their perspective on blasphemy, and they succeeded. By the end of that magazine's run, the laws for blasphemy were abolished in England. And we need to do that with Muslim communities, change their perception on offense over here and around the world.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If you are offended, okay, a lot of people on my side say like, oh, you shouldn't be offended. But that's bullshit. You can be offended. But you should also have full control over the content that you're exposed to, okay? You should, if a book is offensive, it's a very easy solution. Don't read it, right? You should, if you find a page offensive, block it. Right? It's really easy. Actually, it's easier than ever. I encourage you to expose yourself to other ideas, but these content is not being forced on you. If you see our content, you have been looking for it.
To a certain extent, I disagree in the sense that this content needs to be open to everybody, available to everybody, even if they dislike it, even if they're uncomfortable with it. So they have to grapple with it.
But the word you use is available, not pushed on. It should be available to everybody.
It depends on how you look at it. So we're willing to bet that the person that just left would say it was pushed on her because we entered her space of her campus and spoke about these issues.
No. Yeah, I don't agree because they could have just easily not come to this event.
I think if you do, I think there is a problem with, and this is actually not limited to any one group or type or anything like that. With people where there's this kind of idea that, you know, my identity and my ideas are so linked. So, for example, I've come across, and I'll use this example just because it's more fair here in this context. I've come across atheists where, you know, if you talk about religion, the immediate response is you must be stupid, right? And the thing is, if you say anything about atheism, or let's say you talk about an atheist figurehead, like, I don't know, Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or whatever it is, right? There's a personal response to that I've seen from some people, and it's very difficult to get past because people make any discussion an attack on them or their tribe. I think this tribalism is very scary.
Which is why it's important for ex-Muslims and even dissenting Muslims to speak up about their experience, to speak up about the fact that they disagree. So for me and my family, I can have that conversation. They would be unhappy with that conversation, but I can have it. and as a result of that, their attitudes shift. And we see this all the time within ex-Muslim communities, where one person leaves Islam, they're afraid, they're not willing to speak up, and over a few years of being exposed to other ex-Muslims, they're like, okay, all these people are speaking up, why can't I? And then they start speaking up within their homes and within their schools, and it changes attitudes around them, one to the other, to the other.
Yeah, see, let's say like I'm saying Islam is a violent religion, and you're saying Islam is a peaceful religion, promotes peace, and I got it so wrong. I'm just misreading every verse. I'm taking it out of context. I just don't get it, right? And you got it right? But let's talk about it. Let's go get non-alcoholic drinks with each other and go over and tell me why I'm wrong. And here's the thing: we might have
different drinks, alcoholic and non-alcoholic.
Yeah. We might have this conversation, and we might go out of it, none of us changing our opinions. But the fact that we managed to have that conversation without thinking that we were being attacked, it's already a success. Even if we don't change each other's opinion, we already succeeded because we managed to have a civil discussion about something that we passionately disagree on without hating each other.
Can I give you an example of that? Like from in my personal life, when I first publicly said I don't believe in Islam, because I was so involved with a lot of Islamic groups and things in the UK, it was a bit of a thing, and my friends and family and all that. And just before I did that, I sort of, quote unquote, came out to the closest people in my life who were the hardest because I didn't want them to see it in Facebook or whatever. So I went to one of these people, and I hope they don't watch this video. And I said, that person's name, I said, I want to tell you something, and it's a very scary experience. Yeah. You'll know this, to tell someone.
Every ex-Muslim knows
this. Every ex-Muslim knows that, and you're so scared because you're like, oh my God, are they going to cut me out? Are they, whatever? And I said to this person who's quite knowledgeable about Islam, and grew up with me. I said, look, I don't believe in Islam, and I explained some of the reasoning, but I was not interested in having a debate. I was like, I just want to let this person know that I'm there as a human being for them and all that. And I did, and that person looked at me and said. And they didn't know how to deal with this. They were crying. They said, Imtiaz, within fiqh, within Islamic law, you should be killed within an Islamic state. And I said, do you believe that? And I took a bet when I said that, because I thought, you know what, I know him. He's a very loving person, and I think that he will have to come to terms with it, because otherwise, like, how can he accept someone if he thinks I should be killed? How can I accept because he thinks I should be killed? I didn't think he would do it at all, nothing like that. He's not dangerous or anything like that, but the ideology was there. And he came back 2 weeks later after doing, obviously, his own research, and he goes, Imtiaz, guess what? I've done a lot of research, you shouldn't be killed. I'm like, thank you. But the point is, if I had assumed that minds cannot be changed, in some ways, it's almost irrelevant whether that's Islamic or not, right? The point is,
this is sad that he had to read the books to find out that you shouldn't be killed. It's like he should have been like, I don't give a shit what these books say. Of course, you shouldn't be killed. Of course, that's not humane. The fact that we
never thought about it, and you all were raised in that, it's hard to reach that conclusion. You don't see anything beyond that limited horizon.
You don't humanize that problem, right? You don't look at me in the eyes, someone that this person knew since they were a child. Right. Think you don't because you can't humanize it up to that point.
So this is why we think most Muslims are better than Islam, because we think that Muslims, when they look at Islam, from our perspective, which could totally be wrong, it could be very wrong. We got it right. It's not very peaceful, but because they're better than that, they look at it and they just like, this can't mean that I should hit my wife. It can't mean that. Let me so they come up with a lot of excuses and try to make this verse mean something else. But even if we don't agree with those gymnastic arguments to make that verse mean something else, we still appreciate it because we appreciate you as a person, because we know that your standards are better than the book that you're holding. And even if we're wrong, the people that are not for violence, the people that are not for beating women, the people that are not for discrimination, we could still get along, right? Because we have passionate disagreements, but we are in a completely different group than people that actually do violent acts on each other, that do discriminate against each other. That's a completely separate group of people. No matter how far our disagreements are, no matter how offensive you think our opinions are, those other groups of people are completely separate from us. We should be able to bring our disagreements out and talk about them without grouping each other, without like a lot of people on the right, like as long as you're a Muslim, you're supporting a terrorist ideology and you're the same as a terrorist. Or people come to us and as long as you're speaking against Islam, you're the same as the white supremacists and you're basically aiding them. No, those people are completely different than us. We are not actually harming people. We just have disagreements and we can talk about it.
And we can peel people from those edges
Yes.
away as
Yeah,
well.
when I say those people are, I know many ex-Nazis, okay? So just because even people from all these sides, just because we're saying like those are the others, I'm not suggesting that there's no hope for them, right? Don't give up on anybody.
Going back to the topic of civil liberties, within the Muslim world, it's largely not a concept. And the issue is that in majoritarian states, it's viewed as what I believe in is actually true. It's 100% true. Therefore, why should I not discriminate against these people who are wrong? So we need to, a certain extent, instill some doubt in people about the fact that they're 100% correct in order to have the idea that the tyranny of majority is not a good thing. We need, again, expansion of the amount of dissent that is allowed so that within these countries, if somebody is saying that no, Muhammad was not the last prophet, it won't matter and you can have that conversation and go home without any violence happening there.
I mean, I think it's also quite difficult, if I sort of draw it more sort of, I guess, the history of Islam as, I guess, Sunnis believe it, and also just general sort of rulings and things like that. The problem is that where a lot of these Muslim countries draw their ideology from is not necessarily first and foremost the human rights of their citizens.
Sure.
So
if it's coming from an Islamic context about atheism, for example, what we were talking about before, killing an apostate makes sense because we are corrupting not just you. We're not ruining your life. We're ruining the life of your children. You're ruining the life of millions of people in the country. So it's much more. It's not just life after life.
Yeah.
So you lose 50 years if somebody kills you. You lose eternity if somebody turns you away from God.
And I think it's very dangerous because, I mean, let's say we talk about the early Islamic history. It was a history of conquest. There was an imperial force. They were Omar went as far as Dongola. There was in Africa. There was we have like different rulings from that time. We have different documents from that time which explain kind of how people were dealt with.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. I remember even as a Muslim, we used to talk about this document called it's not the Baqt, it's the Pact of Umar,
yeah.
right? Umar al-Khattab, he's one of the caliphs, one of the ones who pushed the empire the furthest. And that pact is seen as a document sometimes, and it's promoted sometimes as a document of showing how pluralism existed within the caliphate, and talking about how the dhimmi, what's the word for dhimmi? It's like non-Muslim,
subservient non-Muslims,
Ahlul Kitab
of the empire. It's not only Ahlul Kitab. And what was crazy is I read that document, and it honestly reads like an apartheid document. It has people cutting their hair differently, wearing different color clothes. If they were Christian or Jews, there's very specific rules as to what.
But that's Sunni Islam. It's not true Islam.
There's that as well. But the point is, if that history and those rulings are where you draw how you run countries today, you are going to have problems with any kind of minority right. It's always very difficult.
So it goes back to placing Islam in its historical place. It was a 7th century idea, so it reflects those ideals. And humanity has advanced past that. So we need to convince individuals first that there's a better way. And in order to do that, we need to have these conversations.
How do you do that without... I guess you'd say the only way to do that is to open conversations of dissent. It's very difficult to do that within Muslim countries. There's definitely...
It's very difficult to do that here.
Here as well. So you would say you'd start where? Here first, or at least in spaces.
Well, we don't need to start. It's already been started. It's
going on in every country in the world, everywhere.
Yeah, what we need to do is we need to find the activists that are already there. We have secular activists already in Islamic country. We have atheist activists already there, and they are way braver than I would ever be. And what we need to do, we need to lend our platforms, we need to give them our voice, the voice that they don't have. We need to invite them to our podcast, we need to get them as a guest writer on our blog post, we need to get them on our YouTube channel.
It needs to be much bigger than that. So the issue is that free speech is a human rights issue. It should be viewed as a human rights issue. Right. Every single country, every single person around the world should have the freedom to live the way they want, to speak about the things they believe in without any persecution. There's a human rights disaster right now, the way we're living it right now. Saudi Arabia was part of the UN Human Rights Commission. Pakistan is a part of the Human Rights Commission. How is that happening? Why is there not outrage over this?
Right.
As a nation, if we want to make the world a better place, we need to give people everywhere the right to talk about their issues. At the very least, if you can't talk, how can you make progress?
Including people that want to harm us.
Sure, right. I completely agree. So there's a bone of contention between us.
Define what you mean by harm.
So Islamically,
even if somebody is advocating for killing us, I think even those people deserve to give voice to their opinions.
Advocating.
Somebody saying that all ex-Muslims should be murdered, should have the same civil liberties as the rest of us,
yeah,
and we should engage with them. That's the only way change will happen. Somebody will state that extreme position, we will state the opposite position, we will have a conversation. The people that are in the middle, or even people like the friend or cousin you talk to, they will choose a side when that conversation happens. And we are talking about human rights. We are talking about individuals. They're talking about this abstract idea and willing to murder over it. In my opinion, most people are good. They will make the right choice.
I guess the difference for me is whether it's an abstract idea. I think ideas do have power, and I think
right. But what did you achieve by banning, by not letting them speak it? Because the only thing you do is.
No, I'm not talking about banning. I'm saying, for example, if someone is on the street in the streets of Ilford, saying that, I don't know, Muslims should be murdered, right? And he's got a bunch of dudes who are kind of hanging out, shouting and stuff. For me, that person is dangerous. Now, Can they be arrested? Probably, because they're inciting violence. For me, they are a danger, and I do.
In the US, it's perfectly legal to do that.
Yeah, Britain and US have slight differences on that, but look, I get the point that there needs to be room even for everyone, including people.
Well, it's not. We're not giving them room to grow. We need giving them room so that they come out of the darkness, so we could fight those.
They want to come out of the darkness to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to stand up and say no, and we're going to...
No.
The issue is that you need people, a broad coalition that is standing up and pushing back against that. Right now, ex-Muslims are largely standing alone.
But I think that if you're a minority, no matter what kind of minority you are, you're always going to be if you're a minority, then you're in danger. That's a very different conversation than if you are a minority with lots of support.
All right, can I
do different things?
But here's the thing. Okay, if they want to kill you, they already need to do that in the darkness. What we want to bring to light is their ideas, because there's no way to challenge those ideas if we don't bring it out, if we don't see it, if we don't hide it. You need to make them not afraid to say it. So we see it if you don't see it, you're not going to recognize it as a problem.
So going back to the example that I was talking about, blasphemy in England in the 1800s, that was a thing. And this magazine deliberately provoked that law in order to change public opinion. They were jailed repeatedly. They went to jail, they came out, they published again. And the sentiment within the UK shifted. And the judge gave them, in one of the cases, a very harsh sentence, and public opinion radically shifted as a result of that, and laws were passed changing that. So the same thing can happen over here. Yes, for any change, sacrifices need to happen. We will lose people, we have lost people. Yeah. It's the cost of progress, it's the cost of freedom.
Yeah, but I don't want an environment where, let's say, ex-Muslims feel in fear of their life.
Yes.
Because they do.
Yeah, so
we're already there.
We're already there.
No, but I would be more afraid of if there was a ban on that speech, and I didn't know if it wasn't being addressed, if it wasn't being challenged, right? If these people are not going to change their opinions because they can't say it. If somebody is out there and it's a harm, we want to know.
The problem is that people who have these terrible ideas, like killing gay people or killing ex-Muslims or killing Muslims or whatever, right? Those people are fantastic at grooming. Right, they're very good at finding vulnerable people, getting them over to their ideology. Something does need to be done about that.
But
that is the problem we need to address, where people aren't pushing back hard enough. People aren't standing up to these ideas for whatever reason, left, right, issues, politics, or whatever. If there's a unified force of millions of Americans standing up and talking about these issues, things will change.
That is fine, until the point when you're inciting violence towards any minority. I think
We're not saying that's fine. Just because we're saying that they should say it so we could see it as a problem and tackle it, that doesn't mean we're suggesting it's fine that they're saying it.
So in Australia, Hizb ut-Tahrir, the guy, Irfan he spoke about this publicly, that there was a Q&A session, he had given a talk and somebody asked about apostates and he said, yes, of course they should be killed.
Yeah.
And that made the news. People heard about it. There were conversations around Australia about that issue. And that's a positive. Muslims are then forced to choose a side. Where do they stand on that issue? And the more those conversations happen, the more people will...
That I agree with. But I think maybe there's a difference here, because I think that if he was actively teaching people,
how do you know he wasn't?
Then I think
because
as soon as he
if it's banned, he's going to be teaching people in his basement. If it's not banned, he's going to be teaching it on his YouTube channel, and when you can see it,
you
as
wouldn't
a
know that unless you're in the police.
Yeah, but that's the state's job is to figure out whether someone's
not.
Ideas grow when you try to silence them. That ideas grow faster when in darkness.
Yes, until the point that they're trying to kill people. Maybe we have a difference of opinion on
violence. There's already laws against killing people, but if laws were supposed to stop them, it would stop them there.
Laws will only jail the person that actually committed it. We need to change minds.
I don't like people who talk about dying. But
I don't like just because
all ex-Muslims
we don't
talk
like
about
them,
dying. It's part and parcel of where we are.
We don't like them either. That's why we want to challenge their views. But part of challenging people's views is actually trying to understand what they're saying, right? So, and even though when we talk to Muslims, a lot of people think that we're not getting it, which we used to be Muslims, so we kind of get it, but we also try to get it from your perspective as well, as much as we possibly can. So we're not going to just say respond to you, we're actually going to say, why do you believe in this thing? And after listening, trying to say why we think that's not logical or why it doesn't make sense. So the only thing I ask Muslims or people on the right or on the left that disagree with us is before just saying, no, no, Islam is peaceful. No, Islam should be banned. No, you're a bigot. Just first try to understand the arguments from your opponent and see where they're coming from. And try to put yourself in their shoes and see, even if you don't agree with it, see the logic behind it. And that way at least you could attack it better. That's way you could oppose it better.
And I agree, Armin, with one thing, which is that I think the art of active listening has gone down the drain a little bit.
Right.
I think it's so important that we can have conversations with people we don't understand or have. So, for example, if when I was Muslim, I even knew that there was such a thing as an ex-Muslim, first of all, and second of all, if I'd actually spoken to one when I would have, because I would have thought, oh, that's horrible. It would have helped me humanize the other, and I think that's very important. You talked about sort of people who are ex-Nazis, for example. I mean, on the extreme, right? I think it is important we can talk to even those people to understand why the hell would you have that ideology? Because I don't understand it, to be completely honest, because it's a very violent ideology. Right. But I think even for me, even after that personal disgust I have, I should be able to sit down in the room with someone who's got Nazi ideology and go, explain to me where you are.
Right.
And I think we've lost
that. We need to make what you're saying about banning certain things.
Well, I was talking about Nazis. I'm talking about Nazis who are not saying we need to kill Jews now. Right? That's where I draw the line. Any kind of active violence issue is, I think, a state issue.
I think even those people are not beyond hope.
We'll go around to that. To give a specific example regarding something like this, the Westboro Baptist Church, most of you guys probably know, is an extremist church. They picket funerals of soldiers, of gay people. They're largely regarded as the most crazy group of Christians in America. They're a small group, a couple of dozen maybe. And one of the daughters or granddaughters of the founder did this most of her life. She's in her, I think, late 20s, early 30s. And she was doing it online as well on social media. I think it was a Jewish person that started engaging with her on her views. Her perspective was this person is obviously evil because everybody besides their limited church is evil. But they had a back and forth. Initially it was heated. Then the guy was very persistent. It kept going for many, many months. So she started engaging with him, even though she thought it was horrible. And that continued to the point where she started viewing him as human, and they actually had a real conversation. And she left the church. She's no longer part of the Westboro Baptist Church. That happens. And the same thing happens in every single group. Many of you have probably heard of Majid Nawaz. He was a quote-unquote terrorist. Now he's a human rights activist, a reformist Muslim. People change when they are pushed to change, when they have those conversations.
Right. Even if they don't change their opinions, as long as they see the other side, that's already a win.
Yeah.
We need to make disagreements great again.
Is that your Trump quote?
on the going to the Trump side of things, or alt-right or whatever, one of the broader problems, in my opinion, is by shutting down these conversations, shutting down the conversations about reforming Islam or the problems within Islam or where we stand. It enables people that have horrible ideas that want, if I can't solve the problem by talking, what options do I have? I'm still going to try to solve the problem. Then violence comes in. So if we want to prevent it to go to that extreme, we need to do whatever we can to force these conversations in our national discourse, where we have.
Now, I was going to say, in the UK, I mean, there's been a bigger push, I would say. There's always been a bit of a push, but bigger push recently with sort of far-right movements. Like, it started with, BNP, EDL, and now we're going to, like, other things as well. And one of the I went to a school in an area that had a lot of people that ended up joining, like, the BNP or the EDL. And I was the one of 4 people who were brown, one of, like, 2 people who were Muslim, right? For a long time. So I have a bit of exposure to this and how some of those kids changed and became far-right. And one of the things that I think really happened was that they felt, and they were poor kids, they were from it's a very poor school. These white kids were poor as, you could say. And what happened is they felt unable to engage with the political discourse of the time. They felt unable to say, hey, I feel uncomfortable with, I'm not saying it's the right thing, but I feel uncomfortable with the fact that there's increased religiosity within the Muslim communities. They had no places to air it. So what happened? The EDL and the BNP and things like that went into those communities, said, we think the same things as you, which they didn't because they weren't that hateful.
Yeah.
And then they slowly groomed them into their position. And what happened is, because you couldn't have a discussion about immigration, you couldn't have a discussion about Islam, you couldn't have a discussion about Muslims, that empowered these people.
The rise of the alt-right was predicted by a lot of people. A lot of people, like people that have issues with Islam and they want to talk about it. And there was a warning. People said, if you shut down these conversations, then the only people that you're giving a platform to are going to be the alt-right. And the prediction came true. And now a lot of people on the left like, oh, look, we were right. The Nazis are real and stuff. Like, no, you created them. You created them. You're responsible for the rise of the alt-right.
In part, yes. In part.
Yeah.
So actually, if you're you care about Muslims, if you care about human beings in general, you want to enable these conversations. That's the only way to move forward. I think we're running out of time. So when we talked about this topic to begin with, we got a lot of pushback. And because to a lot of people it is oxymoronic, fighting Allah, defending Muslims. And today that may be the case, but we need to work for a tomorrow where that isn't the case, not just in America, not just in Atlanta, but everywhere around the world.
Inshallah.
I think we were going to have a Q&A session.
Thank you. Great. Let's once again thank our guests for their dialogue. So if you could, if anyone is interested in asking a question, we can line up at this microphone down here. I'm not going to point people, like whoever wants to stand there. We have microphones for a reason, so there shouldn't be a need to raise our voices. We'll keep it simple, and let's go ahead.
First, I wanted to ask why you guys chose ex-Muslims of North America instead of ex-monotheists of North America.
Because we specifically want to talk about the problems within Islam. We want to talk about where we stand. Ex-Muslims are persecuted by Muslims. The dissent that needs to happen within Muslim communities. And we want to empower people and make them feel... there's an issue within Muslim communities in general where problems are brushed under the rug. In this country and everywhere. And I think it's more of a conservative person thing where conservative religious people often don't like to acknowledge that there are problems. So ex-Muslim forces Muslims at least to confront the problem that people are leaving Islam. And we've already seen such a massive change. We launched about 4 years ago. And at that point it was largely, we don't exist, nobody leaves the truth, Islam is the truth. And to now we're having publications against us trying to talk to Muslims about why ex-Muslims are bad or youth are being corrupted. How do we prevent this? There was a conference in London a few months ago.
4,000 people. 4,000 people came. Go losing my religion.
But are you saying that ex-Muslims is more, focusing on Muslims is more important than focusing on monotheism as a whole?
No, I'm saying for me it's more important, and that is why I am doing it. Okay. Other people are so there's ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Mormon, a lot of different groups that are focusing on very specific parts of the puzzle.
In fact, if you look at this panel, we've got Armin, who's Atheist Republic, which doesn't focus on Muslims.
Okay, so he's not actually part of the ex-Muslims.
We're organizing this discussion.
Even though my organization focuses on all religions, I personally focus on Islam because I'm an ex-Muslim. I know Islam more, and even if those two things were not true, you could focus on anything you're more passionate about. If somebody is an animal rights activist, but somebody is just fighting for abuse against dogs, you're not going to why only just dogs? Why not all animals? That's what they're choosing to focus on.
So doesn't action, therefore, somewhat bring discrimination?
No. What? Why? No, why?
No. So, one question per panel person. We have a lot of people behind you. So, what we could do is you can go back to the line and ask the next question.
Okay. I used to be agnostic most of my life, and I reverted back to Islam. I wasn't really born into a religious household. I was born in India, and my family was fairly secular. My mom has 4 degrees, and my dad has 2, and they really pushed the education button on all of us. So, when I reverted back to Islam, obviously I did my research, and I did look into controversies and stuff like that. And obviously, at first I was trying to look for proofs, and eventually, at that point, I realized that it wasn't Islam that needed to be reformed. I realized that Muslims had to be reformed because they were bringing the ideologies into this matter. And that's the question I'm trying to bring. Do you guys believe that if we reformed Muslims, would it be a different matter? Because because you guys are from different organizations, I understand that, and you feel that if we change the ideologies of the Muslim countries, because I'm agreeing with you when you say there's problems in Saudi Arabia, there's problems in Malaysia and stuff like that. I agree with you, and I would obviously come and protest with you guys if we had anywhere, because I agree with you guys on that matter. But if we fix those problems, wouldn't, because when I was 8, I had problems.
So if in America right now, if the evangelical population was doubled, would it change America? The number of evangelical Christians, if they doubled as a percentage of the population, would it change things? Regardless of how many they are, the more extreme conservative Christians you have, the more our policies are warped based on that demographic. So we have the same sort of problem within Muslim countries where most Muslims are conservative and they push for conservative Islam. They push for it to be in the constitution. So personally, I'm not pro-reform. I'm pro-atheism, ending religion entirely. But that doesn't mean that every single person needs to be an atheist. Like in America, you have a certain percentage of people that are atheists, certain percentage of people that are liberal, certain that are conservative, and due to that back and forth, we can find a happy middle.
See, reform for me doesn't make any sense because I think, there is no God and this is a baseless ideology with no evidence. And I'm going to say it, I'm going to fight against the idea that I think it's wrong. And same as a Muslim. If a Muslim thinks that atheism is wrong, there is no middle ground. It's wrong, and you fight against it, and you try to say why this is a ridiculous ideology, right? So there is. I'm not in the business of replacing one religion with another. That's not. I don't want. If something is a lie, if something is wrong, I'm going to point at it and say that's wrong. But that doesn't mean that I can't work with people that I disagree with. So people are like, why can't you just accept a little bit? Maybe if you change it, I can work with people even if I completely disagree. If somebody is a Muslim and they're fighting for gay rights, in my opinion, that's a contradiction in their ideology. But that opinion doesn't mean that I can't work with them on fighting for gay rights, right? I just have a disagreement with it. If a woman says, I'm a Muslim and I'm feminist, well, I'm going to like, okay, that's a contradiction in your ideologies, but that's okay. You're a feminist and you're fighting for women's rights. I'm going to support you on that. Even though if I disagree with you on Islam, I can still work with you on your fight for women's rights.
So, but like, why would
We're going to have to do a question and answer thing.
Okay, next.
The other brother have any?
Not everybody has to answer it because there are other people.
I'm just aware that there's a lot of people, so if you can just sort of,
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Okay, so you brought up the fact that you said you cannot be Muslim and support gay people, and you can't be Muslim, and what else you said? You can't be a feminist.
I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. Can I tell you what I said?
Yeah.
You can be, you could totally be a Muslim and fight for gay rights. I just think there's a contradiction within the ideas that you hold. That's my opinion. And guess what? I could be totally wrong, right? You could be right. There could be no contradiction in there. I think there's a contradiction in there, right? One of us was right, one of us is wrong. It might be you that's right. And we could have a discussion about that.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, so we're speaking to the person in
Yes.
question. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, see, you said they don't exist, though, right? So this is not a matter of...
I did not say that. I did not say that.
No, when I was back there, sit down, right? No? Okay. Someone, I can't remember who it was exactly, but the words said you can't be Muslim, you can't be Muslim and support gay people, you can't support the LGBT.
Never said that.
I don't think so.
Never said
You can be Muslim and support anything. The definition of Muslim is not that restrictive.
The definition of Muslim has nothing to do with it, and the Quran is the word of
Also,
God.
just
You're
to
a
clarify,
Muslim.
you have one question just like everybody else.
Yeah. No matter what you do, no matter what you support, as long as you believe in Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, you're a Muslim. That's all it takes. Shahadat. If you say the Shahadat, it only says Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. You're a Muslim.
You have another Muslim.
What?
Would you like me to translate that for you?
I know what
There
it
is
means.
no God but Allah, and we...
Oh my God, as former Muslims, we never read that before. That's such a new thing to us.
I know what that means.
Sorry?
I know what that means.
Okay. Okay, anyway, second question.
There was no, go back to the back of the line. Everybody has questions. You can ask another question just like everybody else.
But
No. You can ask as many questions as you want.
No. That's not true. That's not true. No.
Listen, I'm not interested in
We're
that.
happy to have as many
If we run out of
questions.
time, if we run out of time and you don't get to ask questions, I'm gonna stick around.
Oh, yeah, I'll be here. And I still want to hear your questions, sweetheart.
No.
Can we get the next
person?
Please, thank you.
And please keep it to one question each. And if you have multiple questions, we can go around.
Yes. And if we run out of time, we'll stick around and we can talk about it. And even if we go away, I will exchange contacts with you and we can keep on talking about it online.
Okay, can we get the question?
Okay, I'm a Pakistani ex-Muslim, and when I go to Pakistan and talk to them about like the ridiculousness of Islam, like I feel like they're a bit more open to it than they are
That's
here.
very interesting.
And do you feel like that's slowly going away? That in America it's harder to talk about Islam than in certain Muslim countries?
So just a really quick thing. I grew up I grew up between Saudi Arabia and the UK. So I spent 10 years in Saudi Arabia growing up. And what I found very interesting, when I always say this, people get quite surprised. But if you grew up there, you'd understand this. It was more restrictive for me in the UK. And there was a lot more of a push towards conservatism than in Saudi Arabia. Because in Saudi Arabia, I grew up with Pakistanis, with Arabs, with all sorts of people. And we were in a theocracy. So there was not like this identity politics like in the UK. While in the UK, there was this kind of idea that, we have to push this idea that we're all Muslims, that, that we're fighting the state and this, all that kind of stuff. And what happened is it allowed sort of the conservatism to really grow in that area and almost overcome people's other identities. So for example, you were actually a Pakistani Muslim, you're a Bangladeshi Muslim, but those cultures get erased and you kind of have the Muslim identity. And I think a lot of people I can speak for Bangladesh mostly, they say that. They say, I can't believe how conservative it is in the UK. Because in Bangladesh, there's a little bit more room in some places to talk in families, for example, because they live in a country which is an Islamic country, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to say something?
I don't think it's actually getting better. particularly from the state perspective. The state is cracking down much more. And I think part of that is that we are speaking up. Muslim governments are aware that ex-Muslims exist now and that they exist in their country, so they're being persecuted. A friend of mine was jailed a few months ago. Another person I know was jailed 2-3 years ago. It is becoming more and more repressive. They had ads in newspapers throughout Pakistan saying that if you see somebody blaspheming on Facebook, this is the phone number to call and report them. They're actively persecuting and trying to shut down any dissent they can. So,
like in private circles, like those people talking among each other.
So the problem with that is that your experience and my experience and a third person's experience will be very different. It depends on the social context you're in. So it could be that in certain social contexts, people are going in one direction and another, they're going in another direction. Some people are getting more conservative, some people are getting more liberal. That is understandable.
Gotta go for the next one.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm bad at Shades-7, by the way. I've been frequenting the ex-Muslim Reddit sub-channel for the past 3-4 years. Got interested when I had my own falling out with my own faith, and then I started...
What's your background?
I'm Jewish. I used to be an extreme Zionist.
Ultra?
Served in the army, and
Oh,
I guess I
okay.
just got fascinated, just by apostasy, just because I was so committed to my belief
exactly.
before. And
Yeah.
I wanted to get into psychology, so I started digging around and exploring, ex-Muslims, and I guess I arrived at, I don't know if you have any affiliation with the channel, but anyways, I was the guy, and I don't want to toot my own horn here, I guess I currently, unless something's changed since I last conducted the survey, but I have the largest sample study of the Yeah, I shared the data with you, and I'd be happy to share it with any of you guys up there. But some of the more insightful findings, I guess, lend fodder to what you guys are saying about. We always hear about this refrain that you can't reason somebody out of something they weren't reasoned into. That's bullshit.
The panel here is the evidence that that's bullshit.
Yeah, no, and what I find
What's the question, though?
Yeah, sorry. The question is I do see this attempt to racialize Islam, and I don't know whether this is something that's been, I guess, transpiring since, all the hoopla over Trump.
This is much older.
I do
Let's get to the
feel,
question.
how do we push back against these attempts to kind of racialize Islam rather than believing it as an idea? And it's easy to make that distinction,
By highlighting ex-Muslims, because they come from the same places. They have the same. They have the same race. They have the same ethnicity. This is proof that Islam is not a race. It has nothing to do with your race or your country. This is actually exactly one of the main advantages of having an organization like Ex-Muslims of North America. That's how you do it.
The other thing is, whenever the conversation happens to be about religious identity, you need to push back that about what is the person's other identity. All of us have many, many identities. We have many, many backgrounds. Islam is a relatively new thing in the broader scheme of humanity. Egyptian civilization is older. A lot of our backgrounds are much more rich than simply Islam. And we need to highlight that and push back on the fact that Muslim isn't the only identity people hold.
And just a really quick thing about racialization. I think we often forget about the fact that there is a strong Arabicization within the push for the racialization of Muslims. So, Bangladesh was Bangladesh. We were Bangladeshis. When did we become Muslims first and Bangladeshis second? Because the 10% of Bangladesh is Hindu. So, one thing that I bring up a few times is, look, you've got a book that's in Arabic. You've got a language that's supposed to be the language of heaven. You're telling non-Arabs that they have to memorize this book, or that it's extremely important for them to do so in a language that's the best language in the world. Because of a prophet that was Arab, all the Rashidun caliphs were Arabs, all the Umayyads were Arabs, Arab after Arab after Arab after Arabic after Arabic. And we're saying that there's a problem with racialization towards Muslims from just one side. There's problems from both sides, including from within the Islamic, I would say, the right? So, and there's been a push from Saudi Arabia for this and things like that. There's a lot of reasons for it, but we cannot forget that happens on both sides. It happens from Muslims onto other Muslims, and it happens to, from like the left and the right as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so first I want to ask, are you guys familiar with street epistemology?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you think lot of value in things such as that seek to not just cause these conversations to happen more often, but to make them more cordial and productive, even when
it's one tool. It's not the only tool. Of course, it's a good tool, but it takes many different methods, and people have to try. In these videos that ex-Muslims of North America makes, they are not even making an argument. They're just showing you an experience, right? Different people respond differently to different methods. That's why when people come and say like that, no, don't. This tone works, that tone works, this line of reasoning works. No, we have to try different way of approaching people. And many atheists will say like, oh, for me when I read the Quran, it was just so shocking. That's why I became an ex-Muslim. Some people are like, no, for me it was bad not having any evidence for God. For somebody like, I just met ex-Muslims and I thought I met atheists and I thought these people were evil and then they were not. And like, how could these people go to hell? And that was what. So it depends. And different. And like we have Hitchens talks in a different way, and then it talks in a different way. But some people are impressed by Hitchens, some people are impressed by Dawkins or Sam. So it really, I don't think we should. Just see what works for you and what you feel more passionate about and the way you feel like talking, and just go with that one, because we should try every different method.
I wanted to add to that, ironically, one of the primary drivers of people leaving religion is studying philosophy.
Or history of religion.
We actually did a survey on this among ex-Muslims, and
really?
Philosophy was the number one reason.
Wow. That's good.
And just really quickly, what's really interesting is a lot of the Hizb ut-Tahrir people, because Hizb ut-Tahrir, HT it's like an Islamist sort of organization, and they were very, very active on UK campuses, but they had a very strong tendency to push Muslims that they brought into their fold into philosophy. And so if you meet ex-HT people, all of them are like very, very, very interested in philosophy. One of my closest friends, actually, they're very into philosophy, and they left. I mean, many of them stay Muslim, many of them don't. But they all get really into philosophy. So there's a double-edged sword with the type of philosophy that the HT push.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So, is this on? Okay. I remember a few years ago, Ali Rizvi wrote a piece called Guns, Terrorism, and Honesty. Do you guys remember this?
It was a podcast episode.
Oh, there might have been one at the same time. I don't know.
It's a Secular Jihadist podcast episode.
Okay, yeah, maybe. But, so, like, at the top it said this, which of the following statements would you say you agree with? Pick as many as you like. My answer's at the bottom, and there's a bunch of statements, and some of them appear to lean left, and some of them appear to lean right, but, spoiler alert, he says he agrees with all of them. It's an attempt to dispel the contradiction, the same one, like, in the title you guys have.
Right.
People take into one line or the other. Do you remember this at all?
No, I don't remember. But, okay.
Which is wonderful, which shows you that a lot of people are doing a lot of work, which is great.
Right.
Okay, good.
Ali Rizvi and I and two other great ex-Muslim hosts, Yasser and Ahmed and Faisal, there's a podcast called Secular Jihadists from the Middle East. Check it out if you're into podcasts.
Slow down, the way you said it, nobody heard it.
Oh, Secular Jihadists from the Middle East. It's a podcast with 4 ex-Muslim hosts. It's a very good podcast if you're interested in this topic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you bring it? There we go.
Assalamu alaikum. I figured I'd start that with peace be upon you. I'll leave off the religious part. So I'm an ex-Muslim. I grew up Muslim in a Sunni family. I got married, got divorced. My story is not like a horror story, like female generalization, forced marriage, or anything like that. But I ended up leaving just because of cognitive dissonance in the end. And oftentimes I find that a lot of Muslims will say, no, that's the wrong interpretation. That's the wrong this. And I find that a bit disappointing. I don't find it disappointing that they have a prettier interpretation, I guess you can say. Like, you could say slavery is allowed, they'll try to say, oh, it's about that, and when they pay it off, it's okay, even though that's not really how it works. You can be willing to say it. But as someone who engages with Muslims, my mother is a Muslim, my dad is a Muslim, my family is a Muslim, I love them. come out with the doctrine or come out with popularize their beliefs more, because even when we engage in things and they say, no, it's not this or that, it doesn't matter when official translations are coming out from Saudi Arabia that allows these things. Our schools, different Islamic schools, allow these things. So how do we either try to encourage them to popularize their new progressive interpretations, or how do we just dismiss it altogether without sounding negative? Yeah, I guess that's it.
For me personally, I mean, I think we take slightly different views on things like progressive interpretation, things like that. I have a lot of friends who are from a Muslim background and they're progressive, and of course ex-Muslims and things like that. And I also actually have friends who would be consider themselves Salafi, and things like that. And what I think is really important, and it's coming back to what Armin's been saying a few times, it's about the space to have discourse. That's the biggest problem we have, right? That even for Muslims, how much space do they really have to discourse? Because if you're a Muslim and you say one day, you wake up one day and you're like, you know what, actually, the Quran was written in, I don't know, in Patois, right? Like, that's blasphemy, right? That's blasphemy, and there wouldn't be spaces to say that in, really. So my point is, the first thing and the most important thing is, do you have the space? With you, if you're lucky and you can have those conversations with your family, first of all, that's fantastic, and that's a really important thing we need to have in our Muslim families, right? This conversation, to have a conversation, the space to have conversations. The second thing is, in terms of how do you talk to them, in terms of whether progressive versions of Islam that they might follow, are they important? Should we be pushing them? I like to slot them in to my different version of Islam that people have. So, for example, let's talk about I'll pick something random, slavery, right? So people will say that slavery within the context of Islam, they'll say, there was manumission, freeing slaves is the most important thing within a context of slavery being everywhere within that time period, right? Now that's an argument. Whether I agree with it or not, I keep it in my head, right? And the point for keeping it in my head is I can then learn other things as well. So I did a video I have another channel that I do videos on. I did a 40-minute video on slavery and the historical and theological implications for slavery and their context in Islam. And in there, I look at, let's say, the Sumerian concepts around slavery, right? So in the Sumerian concept, for example, you could be a slave that's freed, and that's enshrined in law and in Sumerian law, which is 2,500 years older than longer than Islam, maybe 3,000-4,000 years older than Islam. So when a Muslim says to me, Islam was the first to introduce these concepts, I can go back and say, well, it's not. Do I then promote that thing that I don't believe is true? No, I don't. Why would I? It doesn't make any sense. However, I accept that that's an argument they have, and then I can respond to it.
So, for me, right, if a book is telling you that you should beat your wife if she doesn't listen to you, if she's disobedient, if a book is telling you that this is how you have slaves, if a book is telling you the group of people should be killed, if a book is telling you people that don't believe in this book are going to be tortured forever, for me, that's not a book that you try to change. That's a book that you abandon, right? And so I'm not pushing for other interpretation. This is a book that's beyond reform, okay? But if a Muslim comes to me and says this book is actually for me, doesn't say those things, right? Even though I disagree with that Muslim, that disagreement is so minor compared to the fact that both me and that Muslim think it's wrong to beat your wife. Both me and that Muslim think it's wrong to have slaves. Both me and that Muslim believe that it's wrong to kill people for their ideas. That's the highlight here. The fact that I think that this book is promoting those ideas and the Muslim thinks they're not, it's secondary to the fact that both of us agree that these are terrible views.
But if you provoke that dissonance, they're forced to confront it, and that is how they will change. So if a Muslim believes that Islam does not have slavery within it, confronting them with the reality that it did, and Muhammad himself had slaves, changes perceptions. Most people in the world, Muslims and non-Muslims, are against slavery. They don't know the context behind their text and behind their prophet to understand that. So one argument that I would use for somebody like that is that if you're a Muslim, if you believe that this is the truth, it is incumbent upon you to figure out what it actually says. Right. This is the biggest question in life and afterlife regarding everything. If you can take time out for going to the gym, take time out for doing other things in your life that are important to you, this is about your eternity. Why wouldn't you sit down, read the Quran, read the Hadith, read the Seerah, figure it out? Regardless of where you land, you owe it to yourself to try to understand it.
Right, just to be clear, just because I think it's secondary doesn't mean that we shouldn't bring it up. We should still discuss it,
And not to extend it for too long, but a quick thing, when I was leaving Islam, I mean, one of the ways that I sort of, for quite a while, I was reasonably progressive in some of my views within Islam. And I remember thinking, I need to tackle some of the issues I thought Islam had. And I was like, so it's very uncomfortable because you are being forced to think maybe there's something wrong here. And I remember thinking, you know what, even as a Muslim, I was like, look, what's the most important first kind of ayah for me? It was Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, speak in the name of your Lord. So I was like, there's a search for truth there. Okay, it's a search of truth under the name of my Lord, but I can still look at it. And I think I used that to kind of make myself really think about these things critically. And obviously that's why I'm here, but it was a noble conquest.
If you actually believe it's true, why would you not question it? Why would you not push up and try to understand it? When I was Muslim, I was very big on critical thinking because I actually believed that Islam is right. So sure, throw every argument, every book, every history, anything at me, because if it is true, it will be vindicated.
When I was Muslim, I couldn't understand other Muslims that were not reading the Quran. I was like, they're reading other books. I was like, this is the creator of the universe has read this book. Like, you're spending time reading other books. Why have you not read this book?
Okay, I like other books, so I can't quite relate to that.
Can I give a definition of discrimination?
No.
If you want to, you have to go to the back.
No, please.
Honestly, mate, you gotta go to the right.
Line,
Can we get the next question, please?
Next question.
Can we get the next question,
please? We did this with everybody else.
No, come on, guys. Let's not get like snipes like that.
Well, so I'm actually an apostate. I actually know the apostate. So my granddad on my mom's side is actually an apostate too. He's a 78-year-old man from Baltimore. You got to read Berkshire Russell. Okay. And Tom Hanks. And my younger sister is also an apostate. My cousin is an apostate. My granddad's younger.
Okay, who came first?
My granddad was the first apostate around 1970. And then his younger sister became one too. But and this is mainly on my mother's side. So my father's side of the family, they're very, very Wahhabi type of people.
Match, perfect match there.
Like wearing the burqa or the Highlander he calls the Darth Vader suit.
Okay, Darth Vader suit is much cooler. Come on.
So I was actually talking to two of my cousins. Neither of them are Punjabis, and they both support gay rights. But when I was telling them a lot of, I told them about your podcast actually, some of the things I had heard in it, and this was a few months after Trump had won. This is March of this year, this is April of this year. Now we all know April of this year is when the second church attack happens in Alexandria, Egypt. So when I mentioned that, immediately both of them flipped on me. I mean, they were making shit. Accusing me of, I'm trying to remember exactly, it said that I wanted to be, basically I was attacking too white. I was so enraged about this.
Because a thinking person is a white person.
Yeah. So do you think that if Trump had not won, do you think that this anger that was directed towards me, do you think that would even happen?
Yes. Yeah. It would have been less maybe. Like people have gotten more inflamed, but these sort of things have existed for a long time.
Yeah, but people from the right and Trump did make it worse. It's because people are now more sensitive, right? way more like this is why we hate the alt-right bigotry, because these conversations were already difficult. It was already so easy for people to group us with the bigots. Now they made it even more, we have actual bigots and white supremacists. Now everybody's so sensitive. As soon as you but Islam, like racist, they're bigots. These conversations are. Yeah. So what's your question then?
I think what you're talking about as well. I think your friend Ali called it the green wall effect.
Oh.
Greenwald, yeah.
Okay. So
ultimately, this problem has existed for a long time. It has just been getting progressively worse because we're not looking to solve it. Neither side in the political spectrum wants to solve it. They have different agendas that they have. They're not looking to solve the problem, the left or the right.
Right.
So it's up to us, people like us, to stand up and change this.
Yeah, it's easy to point and say bigot or snowflake or those things and just have no conversation. Like, you're racist, you're a bigot. It's just easy, and it makes you feel. It's easy. It makes you feel good. You feel like I defended my tribe, right? Like I, went there and said something and no arguments, just shouted something, and you just feel good. You go out and you feel strong, right? But it's not. You're not changing anyone's opinion. Are you actually interested in feeling that you won, or are you interested in changing someone's opinion? Which one of these two is it?
One question, I think.
Yeah, one question. Next question. Thank you.
That was a rhetorical question.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Aisha. I am Muslim. Just out of curiosity, you guys come from Muslim families, Muslim backgrounds. Do you still consider yourself culturally Muslim, Eid, Ramadan? Do you partake in those things? Festives and
Can I? Some of us, there are some ex-Muslims that are consider themselves culturally Muslim.
I've used that term.
Yeah,
I'm against the term because it sort of essentializes us in the way that Pakistani culture. I'm from Pakistan. Where are you from?
My parents were in India. Yeah.
Okay, so India and Pakistan culturally are very similar. If you look at the food, if you look at the, they were the same country. Yeah, so even without the Muslim background, Bollywood, whatever, we all share a certain similarity. And if you look at our history, we were the same people. We just differed at an idea 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever. The idea that we are simply defined by our Muslim identity is a bad and wrong idea. I am Pakistani, and there are plenty of Pakistanis that are not Muslim, or were never Muslim, or will never be Muslim. We need to focus on the fact that I don't look at religion as the sole identifier. So I can hold on to liking Bhangra. I can hold on to biryani. I don't need to be a Muslim to have these parts of my culture.
We have ex-Muslim Eid parties. What do you think? I mean, whoa.
So we sort of invert that concept. It's a little blasphemous, but
no. Here's the thing.
The short answer is no.
No. Let me. Can I respond to? So we have some disagreement here, I think, because I think actually Islam is more fun when you, as an atheist, than as an because so some of my friends actually say there is no such thing as Islamic culture. It was Egyptian culture, Iranian culture, Pakistani culture. But I guess if there's any Islamic culture, I think it's mostly about the Quran, right? And I actually read the Quran now more as an atheist than as a Muslim. And I think that if you look at the Quran as a historical document, and you try to figure out what was, it's like a puzzle that you try to solve, like how did it came about. It actually becomes, if you don't look at it as a guide to life, but something interesting that some people wrote, how would it come together, and try to, there's a lot of studies on the Bible, but there's not that much academic non-Muslim studies on the Quran because a lot of people are afraid of even having an opinion about it. But if that opens, I'm actually very interested to see some. I think that would be something that I consider part of one thing that I took. I mean, the stories of Muhammad or Hussein or Ali.
Yeah, Ali.
These are or Muawiyah or anything. These are cool stories. I enjoy these stories now more than I used to.
I think between the three of us, I'm probably the one who would say, because I use the word cultural Muslim as well as ex-Muslim. And it's very contentious in ex-Muslim communities. Whenever we have this conversation, I wouldn't say there's a split, but there's a definite contention there. The reason I use it is because for me, I did grow up in a very, very Islamic environment, right? Like for me, I didn't listen to music. We had nasheeds. We had Sami Yusuf, we had Yusuf Islam. I've got like if I play my music, it's all this stuff, it's all I can tell you the lyrics front to back, And the thing is, it's very difficult for me to actually say that's not part of me because. Like I agree with you. That I think it's a different.
That isn't a majoritarian thing. That's a small percentage of people.
So I'm one of the small percentage of the small minority within a minority within a minority, where it was such a key part of my identity growing up. I can't let it go. Well, I can if I wanted to, but I've decided. You know what? I can engage with it and make it my own. So I go. If I go to the gym, I listen to some nasheeds, but I listen to some hip hop. Do you know what I mean? In terms of. Can you draw other things? So I've noticed this with not just ex-Muslims, but anyone who leaves any faith where they were in a high control group, right? Not every Muslim comes from a high control environment. Many do though. With Jehovah's Witnesses, with ultra-Orthodox Jews, when they leave it, they often have activities that are reminiscent of their faith, but they turn it their own. It's a way of dealing with trauma. So for us, when we do, let's say, Eid, it's because some of us don't have family. Right? Some of us remember Eid fondly, some of us hated Eid, and it's a way to deal with that trauma. Yeah. And I've seen it work. So that's why we do it. Yes, it gets inverted sometimes and this and that, but it's on our own decision. It's exactly that.
Like my friend Yasmin Muhammad, she when she hears us like reading parts of the Quran, she goes like this. That's how traumatic the experience was for her. But for some of us, no. For some of us, actually, there is no right answer, right? There is no anybody. The good thing about being an atheist is that you get to decide, right? You get to say if you want to keep the culture, not keep the culture, enjoy it or not enjoy it. I personally think Islam is more fun if you don't believe in it.
Thank you.
It's really nice to see you guys in person. I follow your blog page, Facebook pages, and listen to your podcast and stuff. I'm from India. I was raised a Hindu. I'm an atheist now, but I kind of I follow the cultural practices, but don't really follow the religious magic part of it. So one thing I agree with you in the sense that the free speech is important because my ancestors grew up believing in the caste system and ancestry were one of the perpetrators of that. But with the exposure to different ideas because of British and other things, I didn't grow up that way even growing up in India. So I understand really the importance of free speech. But the question I have is, I actually thought about it when you said Bangladesh was Bangladesh. Bangladesh was not Bangladesh, it was India. Yeah. So was Pakistan.
It was Bengal before that.
It was the Bengal Empire.
Sorry?
It was the Bengal Empire.
No, I mean, for years it was India together until somebody decided on the basis of religion to make it into a different country, right?
Way before that, it was a separate entity. Bengal was the first place that was conquered by the British. It was an independent entity.
Yeah, after that. I'm saying for a while the British made it together.
We were together as a nation.
We were together and we separated. And when the India was born, India, even being majority Hindu, decided to give their people a secular constitution. There are problems and there are differences, but we started with I feel like much better constitution to start with. The laws are enshrined are much better than on the ground there are realities. So I find this conversation totally missing when ex-Muslims talk about problems or good or bad things. They talk about good parts in the West and they talk bad parts in the Middle East or Iran or Saudi Arabia. But we have a huge thriving Muslim population in India. A lot of them might be ex-Muslims, a lot of them might be Muslims, but they are coexisting there also in a very healthy way. And this, I feel, I am an atheist, so I don't have anything to do with Hindu religion as such. But I feel like from my culture, this point is not at all highlighted in any, and especially like most of the atheist conversations in general are from a very monotheist
Yes,
point of
sure.
view. I used to be a mono-atheist, I'm an atheist now. But I'm sure there must be millions like me who are not never mono-atheists and are atheists now. So what about our conversations?
I highly encourage you to create an ex-Hindu organization.
Actually, no. You should go to Atheist Republic. We have consulates in it. Most of.
I am on your page. I have been following your page for a while.
Right.
But I like what you guys are doing. I'm not saying it's bad at all. But I'm just trying to give you a perspective that probably you haven't.
But you could start it. You could start you could start an ex-Hindu.
I run an atheist meetup in.
Is it an ex-Hindu focused one?
So everybody. I'm an atheist, so there are ex-Hindus who come there, and there are ex-Christians. Not any yet. I haven't had ex-Muslims attend yet. But I'm just saying on the bigger stage, right? I'm a small fish right here in the suburb of Atlanta.
Right.
But in the big conversation, a lot of atheist pages, even Hemant Mehta, who's friendly, he's from Indian Jain background. But he talks more about Christianity than Jainism or Hinduism. So we want our voice to be heard. And you guys, when you talk about, you guys talk about Christianity as well, right? Sometimes.
Yeah.
So this is another thing that. Yeah. I'm not saying this should be the conversation, but
But can you specifically say what is the conversation I'm missing? Talking about bringing.
I'm saying that when you talk about bad things happening in Saudi Arabia or Iran or somewhere, Muslims are free in the West and there's freedom. We are missing 1 billion people where this is also a case, and that's not part of the conversation.
Right. So actually, what we're trying to do.
I want to hear your opinions about the people of India. Do you even read about it?
Yes. And not only we read about it, we actually actively trying to encourage them to, especially ex-Hindus, to join us. So, for example, with the Atheist Republic, what we do is about completely volunteer based. And I have actively gone to our Hindu India consulate and went and we need more ex-Hindu bloggers. We need more content. I've been actively looking for content about Hinduism, and I have been looking for I'm always asking them to come and blog about it because I have sometimes I read about it and it seems complicated. And can you guys come see if I'm getting it right? Can you guys come please blog about it? And actually, if you after this, if you could talk to. I would like to hear what you have to say because Hinduism is because a lot of people think about Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. I'm like, what are you talking about, Judaism? Hinduism is the topic that we're missing on, and that I completely agree with you.
That's a West-centric perspective. That's why it is.
Yeah. Right.
So from my own experience, when I came out of the atheist, I read all of yours, right, and I was so scared.
Right.
But nothing changed for me as a Hindu. So there is something going on in the culture which. Even though there are problems, there is something going on in the culture where people are accepting. So
I had an ex-Hindu on a panel for Faithless.
Right.
So we have an ex-Hindu speaker, that's I've never seen more hate towards a person than from the right-wing Hindutva on YouTube.
Sure. But that's
sorry. So I absolutely agree. And one of the things that is really important for Faithless is that we are across, right, in terms of where the abuse is coming from. When I had the ex-Hindu on my panel, he's someone I know quite well, he said there's a problem. And I said, I believe you, here, sit on a panel. Right. He sat on a panel. We've now seen the problem. So for us, the next thing is, what are we going to do next? I don't know yet. And this is where I need the advice of people like you and the person who spoke, Harry, about that. So I do agree with you, but I think it's a little bit because of the context of this environment. This is about ex-Muslims.
But
that's
I'm
why
saying in India also there's so many
we can't keep having a to and fro because there's a few other people.
Sorry.
But the point I'm trying to make is it has been recognized, at least by us. This is an ex-Muslim organization, and they've already got people on the ground as well. But it is a problem with a lot of atheists. You are right about that. Right. It is very monotheistic sometimes, and it's very important we widen that conversation.
This is actually, but I totally agree that this is a huge gap. That one in every 7 person in the world lives there, and this is not a topic that needs a lot more attention. And I've been actively trying to do that. Maybe not enough, and I would gladly appreciate your advice on it. Another thing that we have done is there's this podcast called Atheist Republic Voicemails, right, where there's no host. All atheists from all around the world go to atheistrepublic.com, and I encourage you to do the same thing. They just leave a recording, and the podcast just is voices from all atheists all around the world. And we had 5 episodes so far out there, and people just go to Atheist Republic, come record and leave it. And I'm hoping that we get a more diverse views from all around. It comes from Indonesia, Philippines, India, Tunisia. So that's another resource that we just recently made available to make sure that we have a more global voice.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Alaikum assalam.
Okay, so I do agree with you guys in saying that you guys, we can agree to disagree. We don't have to have, 100% the same ideals for us to be friends, to communicate. I agree with you guys on that. However, you brought up the point that some people have traumatic experiences with Islam. And I want you guys to be able to distinguish between cultural concepts and from the Islamic concepts, because they're two completely different things.
Sure.
So let's say, some people perhaps they have abusive husbands or abusive spouses, and then they, again, use Islam to justify that. Whereas, other people have traumatic household experiences where Islam is very strict on them.
Mm-hmm.
However, we need to be able to make the distinction that not all of Islam is like that. Just because you, them, and that person had traumatic experiences, there are cultural aspects in which we're introduced to that experience, and that all of Islam is not represented by that.
Like I said, I do work with people from all high control groups and religions and cults as well. And so one thing I found is there's a type of, one of the forms of abuse is to minimize the experience of people who face trauma. And one thing that I found, so for example, with Jehovah's Witnesses, there's a lot of child sex abuse, right? A lot. I've had people on panels who were touched up since they were 2 years old. And you know what the Jehovah's Witness Watchtower organization says to them? This is not Jehovah's Witness, this is you, this is culture, this is your community, this is abuse you went through. They minimize their trauma. And one thing that I'm very careful about is not to do that, because victims need to be heard and not talked to. Now in terms of Islam, I treat it like every other religion, to be honest. Because for me, there's certain problems that are specific to Jehovah's Witness, to Islam, to Christianity, to evangelical Christianity, etc. Of course. But for me, one of the problems that we see is that people do kind of try to make the separation between culture and religion. Bangladeshi culture does not have any concept around, for example, FGM. Right? Now, Islam has different views on FGM, but we did have issues around FGM within certain fiqh rulings. It's just a truth. It's just a truth, right? Just let me speak. Whether you think Islamically that's not permissible, there were conversations from way back when about whether it's supposed to be done. In London, one of my friend's father is a publisher of Islamic books. And you can open them up, and I think it's who's the scholar? What's his name? The Salafis love him. You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, it's a book on how do you do the cut for both the men and the women, right? We're not talking about whether it's permissible; it's how, and that's on the extreme end, FGM. If we talk about,
did you say what FGM is?
Female genital mutilation. So it's if you talk about, let's say, slavery, people say, okay, slavery is not Islamic. I mentioned this earlier to the other questioner. It's difficult to say that when the Sahaba the companions of the Prophet had slaves.
Yeah, but sure, there's different types of slavery.
Sorry, 18 million. Sorry, there's a.
In Africa they had slaves too, but it wasn't the same as westernized slavery. There's two different types of slavery.
Can I finish?
Can I
finish? There's an author called John Alambilla Azuma from Africa, from Nigeria. He's a Nigerian who's written a very thick book on slavery, both within the Western context and within the Islamic context. Have you read that book? I highly recommend it. Just to read it, open it up. If you read that and go, no, this is wrong, because this guy's got a PhD, he's way smarter than I am, read that book. It's one of the best books I've seen on this topic. Why? Because there's almost no books on this topic that people are able to write. The thing is, it's called the author is called John Alambilla Azuma. He's a doctorate, and he's written a whole book on this called Arab Islam and Slavery or something like that. But you'll find it when you search for it, and it's a reasonably fair book. So the point I'm trying to make is there are a lot of discussions that could be had. There were scholars in Islam who had these discussions, right? But we don't know about them today because they get erased out. We all think that everyone agrees and it's all. It wasn't like that. It actually wasn't like that even within Islam. Right. So, but the problem is we tell this. And I say we, as my Muslim hat when I was Muslim, we tell this lie to each other that Islam was this perfect from the beginning. I mean, all the Rashidun caliphs, the first caliphs, were murdered because of the
Abu Bakr.
Sorry?
Abu Bakr.
He died in 2 years. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So the point is there is a really interesting, I think, and Armin, you mentioned about how interesting it is. Why do I spend most of my time studying Islam, Islamic history, academic Islamic history? Because it's actually interesting, right, and we do not talk about it. So I'd really recommend, just quickly, read that book, because it will make you see there's a lot more conversations to be had in this space, and we don't have them right now.
Right. So not every problem in the Islamic world is because of Islam. Okay? We understand it. But from our perspective, there are a lot of problems that could directly be tied to Islam, and we might have a disagreement with that. But that doesn't mean that we're going to tie every single problem to Islam. So we do see the differences. For example, in Iran, there is a huge racism problem, anti-Arab racism problem. Okay, and that's not because of Islam. That's just nationalism, right? So just because we blame some things on Islam doesn't mean we blame everything on Islam. We do see the difference. Now, you and me might disagree that whether Islam is to be blamed or not, and we could talk about that. But that doesn't mean that we don't see the difference, right? So, but you have to understand that a lot of the problems that we see happen, a lot of the things that happen to women, a lot of things that happen, and we see being a mirror copy of exactly what the text is suggesting. So maybe you could come and tell me that, no, you're misunderstanding what you're reading it wrong, and that's a different conversation, right? But we do see the difference between problems that come from religion and problems that have other sources.
The other thing is that there are historical realities. There are, the slavery book that you were mentioning, there is research that can be done to figure out what happened in the past. Yeah. There's a lot of Muslim records of what happened in the past. So again, going back to the fact that I'm from Pakistan, when Pakistan was invaded by Muslims, Mahmud of Ghaznavi was a guy that invaded it. He invaded the northern parts of Pakistan 11 times. And he sacked temples, he enslaved people. Hundreds of thousands of people were enslaved to the point where the global price of slaves plummeted. There was a glut of slaves on the market.
But he argued that that's not Islamic.
But his justification was Islamic. He said it was Islamic. And we're getting this from his own scribe. His people wrote down glorifying what he did. So at least from their perspective, this was all Islamic. So we can figure out what people thought back then, why they were doing that. You can say that Umar enslaving Persian people and bringing them back to Medina was not because of Islam, it's because he was a bad person. But in that era, were other people saying that? Were Umar's contemporaries saying that Umar is wrong for enslaving Persian people and bringing them back? And we know that Umar did enslave people because Umar was murdered by a Persian slave.
Yay. No, but can I just give you a really quick example? I myself, right, when I was around 12 years old, I was told that children, if they die, they go to heaven, right? Because children are ma'soom, right? So, but if you're an adult, then you could potentially go to hell or heaven because now you have a potential to sin, correct? So I concluded as a child that I should kill myself before I reach the age of reason to be able to avoid going to hell. This was not a cultural thing. This was not, nobody else did that. Nobody else told me that this is a good idea. I was like, okay, if I die as a child, I will heaven is guaranteed to me. So I tried to commit suicide to make sure there's no way for me to go to hell. Right? This was a logical conclusion from the premises that they provide. I still think this is a logical conclusion.
From your mindset, that is.
Right? Yeah, but think about the...
No, what I'm saying is being a child, when you hear, if you're a kid, you die, you go to heaven. So with that child mindset, that's what you're going to conclude to. I hear that, I'm not going to go, now I'm going to go kill myself.
Okay, so even right now, I could tell you with those premises, if those premises are true, if dying before the age of reason, you means you go to heaven. But waiting around till after the age of reason will mean that you either go to heaven, you go to hell. The logical conclusion from those premises is to make absolutely sure that you're not going to go into hell. And suicide is a sin in Islam, but not if you do it before the age of reason.
I mean, I want to quickly make a point about trauma, just to draw on that. So, a lot of trauma that's faced by apostates, not just ex-Muslims, is around the concept of hell. Right? So I remember reading the hadith about, people being lifted up by their nipples in heaven. Abu Talib, in hell. Abu Talib is in the lowest form of. Abu Talib was the uncle of Ali, who obviously they love. But
He's the dad of Ali.
He's the dad of Ali. Sorry, he's the uncle of Muhammad. Abu Talib was in the lowest form of heaven. His brain was boiling in his head. In hell, his brain will boil. Now, if you tell a child that story. My first book was Riyadh al-Salihin, which is a collection of hadith by Imam Nawawi. That's what we read there. If you tell a child that the lowest form of hell is that your brain will literally boil, what are you doing to that child? When that child leaves at the age of 30, after 20 years of this, 30 years of this, what trauma do you think that person is going to face? And I don't think that's cultural.
Yes, no, Coach. I used to cry about it.
If you tell a child about the enslavement of African Americans in the Western world, you're traumatizing them from the white person. Does that mean we should not educate the African American children on slavery?
So that they're different things, because hell.
No, but it's the same concept, though.
It's not, because hell is something that you're telling a child they can face if they do bad things.
Right.
So you're telling a baby or a child who's 6 years old, your brain will boil in your head.
Potential future.
And your brain will boil in your head if you commit shirk, which means, because I'm committing shirk, I say I don't believe in God. So you're telling a baby, a child, that if they don't believe in the faith that they are born in, their brain is going to boil. That is abuse. That is child abuse.
My earliest nightmare in my life was about that.
Let's do
the earliest memory of a dream I have is a nightmare that everybody went.
Why are you only educating a child on hell? Does heaven not exist?
Heaven is not abusive.
So guys,
can we do one question per line? Can we do one? Can we? And if you have a comment, let's talk about this again after.
No, I'm done. I just want to say, at the end of the day, you guys can draw your own conclusions. We can agree to disagree and everything of that nature. However, when you come to different places with the title of defying the law, you cannot expect a Muslim to come here without being offensive. Number one.
We can and we do.
We can and we have. We have.
Okay,
we're talking to you. We're talking to you.
At the end of the day,
next person, please.
Next person. This is a question.
You had a question. You asked.
We've given you. We've been given the opportunity beyond everyone else.
This is not for you to give out your statements. I give it to the next person.
I mean, how is that cool? I don't know what.
This is feeling like you won, feeling like I went and showed those coffers, like, oh, you can't defeat Islam. Oh, I won. This is not about winning and losing. This is about having discussion. Oh, mic drop. Oh, congratulations. Wow, good job. Feeling that if you want to have an actual conversation,
Let's move on.
I want to make a precursor. First off, I'd only like to speak to the man on the left.
You don't get to decide who responds.
Yeah, no, you don't get to decide.
Then move on to the next person. Move on to the next person.
No, you don't.
Precursor. I would like to speak what I say, and I'd also like to identify the fact that you all have come up here and you have expressed your beliefs. None of us have come out and said our beliefs, so I would like it if you did not assume a connotation when I speak, because I have not said my beliefs. I could be on your side.
We're not assuming anything.
I
don't know who you are.
All right. I'm talking to this guy.
Okay, let me speak to him.
Okay. All right. So your focus is on Muslims, correct?
Me?
No. The focus of the group, not anyone specific. The focus of the group is on Muslims.
You mean the panel today?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually,
Islam.
Specifically, it's
Islam, ex-Muslims.
And ex-Muslims and Muslims. They're three different separate religions.
So Islam. We can say the focus is on the religion of Islam.
Sure.
Okay. So the formal operational definition of discrimination is finding recognition between different stimuli. It's focusing attention on one certain thing. when you focus on racism, when you focus on one race, that's what the discrimination is. It's racial discrimination when you bring the racial part in. But discrimination is just the focus on a different stimuli. If I've got 4 pencils and I focus on one, I'm discriminating against the other 3. That's the definition of the word, the reason.
Okay.
So I wanted to say that if you guys are focusing on Muslims, you're discriminating against the other religions. And I'm not saying your group is not doing something very powerful and effective, but it is not promoting the treatment of discrimination. It's still discrimination because you still have a title that makes other people feel not.
Okay, so what's the question?
Yeah, so the question is, are we being discriminatory? So by picking
No,
me...
I'm saying one thing that you guys did say is that you were promoting, or that you guys are against racism and against discrimination. That was said. You guys,
What's the question?
What's your question?
My question is it not true by the definition of discrimination and by what your group's actual name is that you are not discriminating against other groups?
No.
She proved it.
Are you aware of your discriminatory actions in your group?
I mean, you said it today. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I support the group.
I'm really having a lot of trouble with this.
I'm trying to make
okay,
this
just let him answer now. Yeah.
I'm trying to wait. So ex-Muslims of North America is discriminating against other religions.
I'm saying you cannot say that it promotes integration and it is anti-discriminatory. You can't say that because that is contradictory. Just how, like with white supremacists or alt-right, it becomes contradictory.
If I'm a Bangladeshi and I'm supporting the Jagannath Trust in Bangladesh, in the UK, which supports the right of Bangladeshis, particularly women. Are you asking if I'm being racist at that point?
I'm not saying you're being racist or discriminating. I'm saying you cannot say you support anti-racism or anti-discrimination because you are not fighting against it. You are actually...
By that logic, Muslims that are fighting for Muslim rights are also being discriminatory.
I said they are not being discriminatory or racist, but they cannot say that they are fighting for anti-discrimination.
Yes, they can. A Muslim can fight.
Because you're discriminating, and I'm talking to that guy. Once again,
I get to respond. I have a mic here.
On to the next person.
I have a mic and I get to use it. You don't get to tell me not to use my mic.
Armin. Okay, Armin, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I would like to answer that. No, I know
you
what
guys
you're
have
saying.
the power. You can work your way around the small fish, but at the end of the day, the small fish that
A Muslim can one day go out and fight for Muslim rights, and another day go fight for LGBT rights, and another day go fight for women rights. We doing one does not mean we exclude the other. We are fighting many battles at the same time. We are fighting anti-Muslim bigotry. We are fighting discrimination against ex-Muslims. We are fighting racism. You can't. This is a very bizarre claim that you're making. You have to understand.
That's what I just don't understand.
So the next question.
No, we're not going to, because it's not fair to the other people that if we keep doing this. Do you want to just go to the back and then we'll take another question if you want to ask another question, if we have time. Can we get the next? The gentleman who's been waiting very patiently.
The answer is
next
no.
person.
The answer is no. We're not being discriminatory.
Next person, please.
I'm not.
Do the back. Did you have a question? Thank you. Is Atlanta like this normally? Because this has been very odd.
If the people that are leaving, if you guys want to reach out to me online, I would be willing to have the conversation with you.
Okay, sir.
So we're all familiar with Reza Hassan. Needless to say, the three of you are not one of them. I like Reza, right? And a few years ago, there was a debate going on. He was on, I forget which network. I think it was MSNBC, and they were discussing FGM. And
CNN.
We were talking about that earlier with that left, we were going to be all you guys. And he was saying that this was an African cultural problem. Now, we all know this actually, this actually happens in Indonesia too, not just Africa.
Yeah.
And it's also in the, I don't remember which one it was, whether in India too.
So it happens.
And the Bora support.
Yeah, exactly. The Bora or the Indian that you're talking about. What's the question?
So since the media is giving, they're really giving Reza Hassan a platform, right?
Sure.
How do you three, how do you three of you intend to, if you could, how would you three want to get on their good side so that they would give you a platform network like MSNBC or hopefully not Fox.
So, first off, Raza was lying, as most people understand, and he was being somewhat racist by saying it was an African problem. He was defending his religion by throwing other people under the bus.
Is this not oxymoronical?
Sorry.
They said you don't have the mic. You wait your turn.
I'm talking to that guy again, dude.
You wait your turn.
Keep going, sorry.
You were talking.
In any case, as you mentioned, Indonesia is very common, and if you there are surveys in Indonesia where they ask why they do it, they cite religion. The same with the Bahura in India, the same with Yemen, the same with Kurdish people. What it is that most, not actually all Sunni schools of fiqh condone FGM. There's no prohibitions against it. Shahafi in particular mandated. And therefore, wherever Shahafism is common, Somalia is one of them, it has very, very high incidence. Going back to the platform stuff and whatever, I actually wrote an article along with Sarah about that, which went viral and I think damaged Raza to a certain extent because it exposed the fact that he was lying. And we need to do more of that. If the mainstream media is bigoted and they only want to promote a certain sort of narrative, all of us need to push back against that. Ultimately, what will happen is that anybody that is lying will become disempowered when people realize that they are liars. And to CNN's credit, they did reach out to me. They did talk about it. But they wanted me to come on CNN with Raza, and Raza refused.
But he refused.
Yeah.
Why is that? You know why?
Because he probably knew that he was lying.
Guy's been waiting.
Okay, last question, the next guy.
We will stick, if we don't get to your questions, we're going to stick around so we could talk in person as well.
Hey, I'm getting cold, so I just want to start by saying I think you guys did a great job. I agree with a lot of what you guys had to say, but personally, I am a devout Christian, and I don't think Islam's a disease. I don't think it's really an evil ideology. I mean, I think there are evil aspects to it, just like there are evil aspects to Christianity.
Okay. We have disagreement,
But
and we can talk about it.
It's because of my Christianity that I believe it's not a disease. It's because of my Christianity that I love other people. I choose not to hate.
Okay.
It's not hate to say this. I disagree with a certain ideology and it's a bad ideology.
Growing up in church, so it's because of my Christianity.
But hating an ideology is not the same thing.
Here's the question.
Wait your turn, sir!
Thank you. So here's the thing. I've done a lot of good with my church. We do a lot of charity. We do a lot of. We believe that it's the work that matters, not really what you believe. So you run a nonprofit, Atheist Republic, right?
Right.
Do you guys do any kind of like charity work? Any kind of stuff
Yes.
actually like what?
Well, we went out and we helped the homeless. In Philippines, there was a lot of misplaced people because of the attack of the ISIS attacks. A lot of people got misplaced from the war there. So our Manila consulate did an amazing job. By the way, you guys, if anybody from Manila is listening to them, go join their group. They did an amazing job in reaching out to a lot of Muslims that were displaced in the Philippines because of the war. And we have a lot of. You guys do a lot of charity.
So like reaching out or like.
No. Going in and giving them clothes and food and blankets and tents and stuff like that. But I mean, even if we didn't do stuff like that, the purpose of the nonprofit is to provide a community and providing a platform for atheists to speak. So that's not the focus. The reason why sometimes it becomes a focus is because our membership sometimes decides that they want to do something, and every time they decide they wanted to do a charity work, like help the homeless. Our mission of the organization is to promote all the projects that the membership wants to do, and a lot of the times it becomes charitable work. So we provide a platform for atheists to do the things that they want to do, whatever the projects that they have. Yeah.
Similar to a church, like a church provides community, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the primary functions of a church. People get together, they have community, and they leverage that to do other things as well.
Yeah, it's also. I mean, for me, it just sounds like there's a lot of proselytizing, and I mean, there are churches that do that.
There's nothing wrong with reaching out.
But how can you be critical of churches that proselytize?
We're not.
But you're here to
No.
spread. You're spreading a word. It's atheism, and you said earlier you wanted to promote atheism and you wanted to
Right.
Convince people if you can.
We're not critical of churches for proselytizing. That's okay. They should do that. They can do that.
Okay. My church believes in evangelism through action. Like you just go out, you do things, and somebody asks you about it.
Right. But there's nothing wrong with churches that want to advocate Christianity. They should be able to do that.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.